How you doing, Tom?
Are you speaking?
Yeah.
You know what, we might want to do that was great. That would be great.
Still got the signature for it.
Yes, thank you.
Well, sir, how are you?
Did you have a comment? You know what, why don't I just put Okay, welcome everyone to the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Board of Education for Foster District 161 on Monday, September 28th, 2015. Do we have a roll call, Mrs. Brino?
Okay, Simmons?
Here.
Odom? Here. Carroll?
Here.
Marks?
Present.
Torf?
Here.
Huckabee? Here. Paredes?
Here, and a quorum is present. First up, we have audience comments. Community members wishing to be heard by the board must, again, sign in before the commencement of the meeting, as several have done. Comments may be made by visitors at this time regarding items not on the agenda. Visitors wishing to make comments upon an item on the agenda will be recognized by the board president, myself, during consideration of that item. According to board policy 20:230, the board president has authorization to restrict comments to 5 minutes. I'm going to ask, I see that there is a few parents on for this, what appears to be a similar issue. And if you wouldn't mind, parents, is there one person that you'd like to designate to speak for you? I think that might make things a little more efficient. So first up, we have Mark Cole. And we also have, it seems, Nathan Lagarty, is that correct? Lagarty, sorry, I apologize. Is it all right if, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Well, where was your question going to be? Is it all right for what?
Yeah, I would ask, is it okay if you represent the concerns of Mr. Lagarty?
Yes, that's
Okay.
Well, I think we have similar concerns. If anyone see that I forget something, feel free to come up and voice your concern. You know, the reason why we're here is because this group is charged with educating our children, and we have a situation where we feel that that's not happening. Since the beginning of the school year, our children's teacher has been absent excessively, and we know that that's going to be a detriment to our child's education. So
Yes, what school was
Heather Hill. So I guess we've met with, my wife and I have met with the principal, we've met with the Dr. Doster, and you know, they've told us things that makes us feel comfortable, but what we're seeing is something, you know, that's still concerning to us. You know, we've, like I said again, we met with Dr. Fears, and she shared with us the things that they have in place for, you know, rectifying the situation. At the time we met with her, she said, "Oh, she'll be back next week. She'll be back next week." And like every week, it's oh, she'll be back next week, and it's kind of frustrating. The situation has improved slightly. They, instead of having multiple substitutes, they've kind of narrowed it down to one substitute. But that, from what I understand, I'm not sure that that substitute isn't certified. So we'd like to have a certified teacher in there teaching our children. We'd like to, have them take a performance assessment or something, so that just to see where they're at now, because it's been weeks of the school year and my kid hasn't really brought home any real substantial schoolwork. So they're I would imagine that all the kids in the class are having the same situation happen. And this, my expectation of this school district and the school board is that they provide a world-class education, and that's not happening. I don't know. I guess we want the board to take proactive actions in rectifying the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
If I can make just a couple comments. So there are no fewer than a dozen parents from the 4th grade class at Heather Hill. This is Miss Dahlstrom's class, just for the record. And, in addition to, at this point, given there's a history, prior history.
Yeah, we don't want to.
Well, let me finish what I'm
Sure.
going to say. I know you can't comment on it, but
You know what, if I can interrupt for a second, if you would like to talk to someone about a specific issue with a specific personnel here, then, by all means, talk to their supervisor. For the purpose of the board, if you could speak in general terms, that would be better.
sure.
Thank you, appreciate it.
In this situation, what the parents would like is a permanent solution. We don't have confidence that one is there for sure now, nor even if the intended solution returns, will that be something that we can count on. So we hope that this gets immediate priority attention. We hope that we can get a solution that gets our kids back on track immediately.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have, on the audience comments, we have Mr. and Mrs. Thomas.
Evening board. I'm Teresa Thomas and my husband Randall Thomas. We've been here prior in regards to partial enrollment. I'm not sure if all board members were here initially when we came. Our first meeting was on August 31st when we expressed our concerns about our son being partially enrolled at Parker. Prior to August 31st, we spoke with Dr. Ward. She informed me about the policy of partial enrollment. Again, we're taxpayers in the community and been regularly enrolled for 14 years prior, had not known about partial enrollment issues. Mr. Duster on September 8th advised me that he did not want to enroll my son for partial enrollment. And he did indicate if we would have come as a regular student, he would be able to take part in music. And obviously, had I wanted my child to be fully enrolled, I would have enrolled him because we had done that for many years. And then again, so we're now here again asking the board to hear us on this because Mr. Duster has already indicated that he does not agree with us that our child should be partially enrolled.
Just to clarify, what we're asking for, my son was in
band last year, or his first year as a 5th grader. We have now elected to put him into private school rather than going into Parker for various reasons. However, we are still taxpayers, have been for upward of 14 plus years. My daughter also went through Parker. She's now at HF and doing extremely well. We brought some concerns for her a few years back, which were also not satisfactorily handled. However, the simple thing is, Joseph, my son, we would like for him to be able to continue with what he's already started last year. And I would like to see if there is, I know there's been exceptions before for partial enrollment. I want to know what those exceptions are, when they took place, and under what circumstances they took place. What we're asking for is not something that is so extraordinary or out of line. You got an 11-year-old little boy wanting to continue with what he's already started. All right. It's not like there's not room in the class. The class just began, and we're paying for it anyway. Even if he's in private school, I'm paying the taxes for other kids to be able to attend class. And I want that exception made. And if it can't be made, then I want to know why, and I want to know when and if it has ever been made before.
And again, just to be clear, we would like for the board members to give us their thoughts on this and give us their, you know, up or down vote on this, because Mr. Duster's already indicated.
Yeah, it shouldn't be up to one person. It's a board. It's not a single vote. So if there's a vote, I want to know who voted and in which direction the vote was taken and what our next step would be. Hopefully it can be taken care of now. I mean, before this continues and lingers on.
Right.
Because I don't want to have to come back every week. So I've got other things I could be doing.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas. I can tell you that review of policy 740, which is non-public school students, including parochial and homeschool students, is a discussion later on this agenda, which at that point we'll talk about more specifically.
Okay, and how long will this take for us to get a notification of what your decision is?
Oh, I think that, you know, certainly, you know, and again, we're going to talk about this later. It's just to give a brief background, and of course, Mrs. Marks is going to summarize for us one of the chapters for the books that we go by called Coming to Order, which is really the guiding principle of how boards work and they function. One of the key functions of the board is to make very clear policies so that the superintendent is not put in a situation where, okay, well, you know, they have to be the bad guy, or, you know, they have to, you know, a lot is put on them, or they're somehow backed into a corner. All of which we'll explain later, and we'll come back to this. But, you know, our goal here is, of course, we do want to meet the needs of all students here as equitably as possible. And, you know, this is not meant to be a tyranny of technicalities, but they are in place for a specific reason, which we will have an open discussion about.
Well, what my wife had been told was that there was a concern about hiring more staff. That's not an issue. Or the timeliness of it. Again, if we had been notified, or I mean, we've been in the district forever, we would have followed those steps. Right now, what I'm concerned about is Joseph.
I understand. It ultimately comes down to an 11-year-old boy who wants to be a part of this fantastic arts program that we have, and I certainly understand that as a parent. My son just started band, and so I understand completely. But again, this is something we're going to come back to.
I just want, if there's just one last,
Sure.
if there have been exceptions made, I want to know how those exceptions were made as opposed to what we're asking for.
I understand.
So we're all clear going in the same direction, because there has to be consistency.
I promise you will be very clear this evening.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Amu. Thank you, by the way.
Hi, I'm Shelley Amu, 2 children in the district, 8th grade and 6th grader. I'm here for my concern about the writing curriculum, and I want to say thank you to Dr. Ward, because she's listened to me and listened to me and listened to me, and I'm still thinking we need to address it a little further. And my biggest thing is the writing curriculum. There is no true writing curriculum for the 8th grade class. 6th grade and 7th grade have 2 blocks. They have a language art and they have a writing piece. The 8th graders do not. And I just think that it's really critical that we look at this again and consider a writing specialist until we can get a writing curriculum in place. I spoke with my 8th grade English teacher for my son, and he says, no, he does not have a writing curriculum, and he doesn't even have time to teach it if he had it, because he has less than 45 minutes for that class. So that's a big concern of mine, because he has the honors, or supposedly some of the 2 highest classes for English, or 2 of the classes that are in the honors, or however they're partitioned. But so these are the kids that very likely could be in the IB program. And from what I understand from the kids that are in the IB program now, the one thing that they had the most difficult time with when they got to HF was writing. So you're talking about the best and the brightest who are not getting a writing class, and then they're going to go on to HF and perhaps be in the IB program and will not be able to sufficiently write. So that's why I'm here tonight. From what I read in the letter to the district, there's a $403,467 amount that we could use. I am asking, could you consider using it for a writing specialist? And I understand that we're writing across the subjects and all that, but the fact is some teachers that are not English teachers, and even some that are not comfortable teaching writing. And I think that we need to address it. And I've been talking about it. My 6th grader, when I started talking about it when he was in 5th grade at Western, he's now an 8th grader at Parker, and we still don't have a writing curriculum. And I think it's time we really think it's one of the most important things. Reading, math, the 2 of the most important things, and we really need to address it. And I think it's far time we address it. If we have some extra money in the curriculum, why not get a writing specialist that can help the teachers do the writing prior to this? And I know it's a problem with the 8th grade. Maybe the other discussion has to be, when would they do it? Because they only have a 43-minute or 45-minute writing period. When would English class, when would they do it? I don't know, but I think we need to work it out. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Are there any other further audience comments? Yes.
Can I?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Kalisha Wilson, and I am the parent of Torrance Wilson, who is in Ms. Dahlstrom's class. And just for the record to show, can the parents of Ms. Dahlstrom's class please stand just to show?
Can I ask
Yes.
that
No.
we not? Yeah.
No.
It's only because it's really not fair to the other person that you name, unless you're saying how great they are.
No. I just wanted to show a present of how many parents were here for that issue. Do you have any way that you're calculating that from the sign-in sheet?
That is something that they certainly, and maybe the most appropriate way is send an email saying that we're here.
Okay,
just
that's
let
no
us know.
problem. That's no problem. That was not the intent. The intent was just simply to show how many parents that are here. Because many of the other parents have already spoken, I'll be very brief and to the point. I know that the passion and the concern of the parents have been conveyed, but I would ask the board to please approach this issue using a SMART technique, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So just to touch a little bit more on the specifics, I know that it was mentioned that we are requesting a certified teacher immediately. We would also like to see the certified teacher be a permanent solution, simply because studies have shown that kids benefit from consistency, which our children have not had since the beginning of this year. Also, in being specific, we've touched on an assessment being done, but we want to make sure that that's compared to all the other children in the district. And if there is a difference found between our children and the other children, we are going to ask that an action plan be put in place to bring them up to speed immediately. And we do not want to have the conferences at the scheduled time. We would ask that they be pushed back simply because no one has spent enough time with our children consistently to actually assess their individual needs and performance. Also, some specific things to point out is that we were informed that the children have been using Odyssey, but with checking back in with the children, we've been pretty much communicated to that it's not being completed as the children don't have logins. They have no solid routines.
Mrs. Wilson, if I could, I appreciate all that you're telling us. And I think it might be more efficient if you wrote all this down in an email, send it to our administration, and if you want to CC myself or other board members, that's perfectly fine. But I would, these are all things I understand. And the most appropriate way is to address it to the superintendent. If you would like the board to know as well, that's, I would love to be informed. I can assure you that the administration is aware of this concern that parents have and that they're dealing with it in the most appropriate means possible. Again, it is important for the public to be heard on these issues, and it's very appropriate that you would certainly want to advocate for the optimal educational experience in our district. But I ask you to please do so in the form of an email, and I think that will be more efficient.
Okay, we will definitely follow up with the email. Just one last question, and then I'll be seated. In terms of time bound, what can the parents expect once that email is sent? Because it will be sent immediately. What can we expect once that's sent in terms of follow up?
Well, I think certainly you should expect I think 24 hours is the expectation that your email has been sent or that it has been received and it has been looked at. In terms of, and again, I can't make promises. I mean, this is why we hire, great administrators to specifically address the issue. But I can tell you it will be, we will make sure that you have the optimal educational experience for your child as soon as possible, as much as we are able to do.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Wilson, what was your first name?
COWsept28.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up on the agenda, do we have a discussion, presentation? From Kim Richardson, the Village of Flossmoor will be in attendance to discuss the proposal. Village Flossmoor Library are participating and would like us to consider.
Hi, Ms. Richardson. How are you?
Dr. Darster, well, and everyone, thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the village this evening. I do know that Dr. Darster and I have been discussing this proposal, and I'll allow him the floor first, and I can follow up if you need me to, or do you like me to?
Good. Yeah, I will give information. I've shared the proposal with the Board of Education a couple weeks ago, and also we put it on here as we had mentioned. But Board of Education, just want to let you know you have a proposal. You've seen it a couple different times now, but it is from a company called COWsept28, and it is a branding and a research firm that works with different communities in regards to branding the organization. And the three entities that they would like to work with are the Village of Flossmoor, Flossmoor Library, and Flossmoor Elementary School District. And there's examples that were shown in the proposal, and if you went to their website, it was Oak Park District, where they gave information and branded different things for them. So some of the input for this, if we were to go ahead with the initial phase, there would be focus groups, there would be quantitative and qualitative surveys that would be taken to try to get more of an idea. And then the group would provide a recommendation. There's a cost of this initial phase, and that cost is $9,840. That's for the three entities divided by 3. So you're talking about $3,267. Once that is done, then the district would move on. And as far as the branding purposes, if that were logos or something of that nature, my understanding, it could be a minimum of $10,000. Is that correct?
Well, it all depends on what the recommendations you decide to follow. So just to back up a little bit, Sickage, we approached Sickage, the village of Flossmoor did, after some research that I had completed. And the idea is that they're going to be making recommendations to the community. Those recommendations will include logoing, taglines, marketing, so forth. If you do not know, the village of Flossmoor currently does not have any form of branding. The one that may be familiar to everyone is the children crossing the street or children running with the soccer ball. That was done through the HF initiative back in the late 90s. And so we as an organization, as a community, does not have our own identity. You see that at Homewood, you see that at the school district itself, as well as the park district. And so we wanted to take this process on and make our identity known and unique to the community, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to include our community partners, which includes the library and the school district. And the reason for that is so we can have continuity. Now, we understand that you have different challenges and different audiences than we do as a community. You not just service Flossmoor residents, but also communities outside of Flossmoor. And as well as the fact that you have schools that we don't have that already have their own identity with their mascot as well as logo and so forth. What's so nice about this is that you get a commodity of scale. So for the price that you're bringing into this project, on your own would probably been a $10,000 project to do the same type of research. But share amongst the three of us, it does bring that cost down significantly. And what it'll allow for you to do is that they will create the survey, they will include the school district as part of the process, having spoken to staff as well as individuals that might be assigned to be a part of this, but then the information that is received is individual to your organization. So even though it's a shared process, it's individually going to be written up for your specific needs and marketing. So whatever steps you take beyond that will be at the discretion of the board or the administration, as well as would be with the Village of Flossmoor and the Flossmoor Public Library. But what's so nice about this is that it's the shared resources that will allow for us to take that information and then be able to utilize it and implement it when our budgets allow for it, or there might be things you can do in-house that they recommend that you wouldn't have to go outside for. Now, I can only speak for the village. We understand that a lot of this will be from the ground up for us. So we're laying the foundation. We just don't want to be in the back room trying to create a logo and create a tagline and image for ourselves. We want to be able to have research and data to give us that backing to why this makes sense for our community. And what would be nice is to have the school district a part of that. You are part of our community. You are probably one of the most integral parts of our community. Is when they look at Flossmoor, they look at our school district, they look at our amenities to be a part of our community. And so, and that being residents as well as businesses. And so having you as part of this would be a great opportunity to work together, but also I think would be a great way to share our resources in the community and show what it means to be a part of Flossmoor.
I just want to, Dr. Doster, when did we go to this orange and black F as our logo or brand?
I believe 3 years ago.
And how much did we spend on all of the rebranding of all of the merchandise and marketing that we did with it?
0.
No money on it?
It didn't cost anything. We actually had one of our administrators' wives is a graphic designer.
I'm not talking about the design, I'm talking about all of the product. We have shirts that our staff members wear, we have mats that are all over, we have the website, we have the letterhead. I mean, those things cost money, correct?
Well, the letterhead's just regular paper, it's just a print off that we utilize, made our own template. As far as the rugs that we have, the carpets, I have to check on that, but.
So you don't know what the total cost for us rebranding the district 3 years ago?
I could look, it wasn't a significant
That would be
price.
important because it just seems, not to you, I think that the idea is wonderful if it were 3 years ago, but we just rebranded us and it just happened. I mean, we didn't have a research done, as the pastor just said, someone who we don't know, I don't know who it was, but somebody's wife created the brand for us already. And it was, I mean, this is like, we're just now getting this out here. 3 years hasn't even been enough for anybody to become familiar with the brand other than the people in the district. And then to expend additional money, it's just confusing to keep changing our brand. You know, it's like we don't know what we stand for. We don't know who we are.
Mrs. Harrell?
Actually, I had a similar question, which was about what process we went through for the current branding. And again, this is probably a more internal question, because I see that obviously the benefit when you're looking at a community, schools are a huge part of it, so I understand the consistency and the branding piece. The question is for immediate benefit to the school district where we're spending the dollars here. So I probably have more questions outside of the meeting, but along a similar line. Thank you.
Can you just, are you playing too?
Yeah.
Oh. Can you just explain the cost? Again?
Sure. So the cost for the cost of the project is $9,800, $9,840 to be exact. So that's the cost, and that cost is the research. It's the research and recommendation. It's not implementation. It's not, you know, they're not going to come back and say, here's 3 options, you pick one. It's more, this is the idea of what your logo or your look should be, color scheme, how do you utilize taglines and so forth. So for most processes, this is what most organizations do first, so that when it's time to do the development, you have a foundation. And you can say from that foundation, this is how we came up with that. We did some research and we talked to the community and so forth. However, with that cost, typically a cost for this type of project is more expensive than implementation. It's usually 20 plus because of time, staff time, and so forth. Because of our relationship with SICH and me just really being good at negotiating, we were able to bring that cost down to what we thought was reasonable for us to be able to move forward with it, understanding all our budgetary constraints. Now, I understand that you guys have concerns about your brand, which I know was implemented a few years ago. The idea, this is just this is an opportunity to put down the foundation. So if you don't implement it tomorrow or next year or down the years, you may want to wait a few years. You at least have something to base off of, because they're going to look at your current everything. They're going to look at your current emblem, all the school's emblems, everything. And so that's part of this research. You can utilize that. You can, move that forward in future years. It doesn't have to be implemented right away. But at least you now have something as a foundation. So when you decide to move forward, you have that in your hand to do so. So it's not all going to be done. But for the village, I don't see this happening overnight. It is going to be a multi-year process for us, just because of cost. But at least we have a foundation, so if something happens, someone can pick this up and say, well, we now know where they were going, what their intent was. We can go with another company or whomever to do the implementation, but the board has agreed that this is what they want to do, and so we can just implement it at that time. So to take to your point, yes, you have a brand at this time that you want to continue to use, but this would be something that in five years you might say it's time to refreshing ourselves. What do we do? And now you have something that you can look back on and say, does this still apply to today without having to spend any additional costs down the road? So you're kind of planning for the future in a sense, at a cost that if you did it on your own, if you decided to do this type of work, would be much more expensive than partnering with the village and the library.
You said it's $3,700.
Correct. It'll be 32, right?
I think Ms. Marks was.
Sorry, Beth.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that you have a relationship with SICH. Can you explain to the board what that relationship is?
Well, let's separate SICH. So SICH there's multiple entities of SICH. The village has a relationship with SICH through the fact that they're our auditing firm. And it was surprising to our administrative staff, our village manager, that they even had a marketing. When I say relationship, it is meant to be that we've never worked with them as regards to marketing, But over the course of 5 years, as I've learned a little bit about the whole process of branding and what it means to have a campaign and so forth, I utilized their expertise in that area and built a relationship working with them in that regard. So this would be our first time working with them on the marketing team aspect, which is a total separate arm. They don't talk to each other. They're two separate entities in that regards. But for most municipalities, when you say SICH, they think of the auditing arm versus the marketing. However, we still think that with that being said, they've shown with their really good research skills that maybe having that auditing arm wasn't a bad idea, because they're very analytical. Metadata, they drill into everything. They drill into open questions. So if you make a comment and you say cool, they will even get to what that means to elicit some type of qualitative data to it. So that's what I meant in that regards.
Okay, and how many different firms did the village consider before you said?
We looked at possibly over the course of a couple years 4 firms. We accepted proposals from a couple of firms after looking at what I was looking for out of a firm, and we went back to SICH, and that's how we were able to move forward with the SICH. Because we only have X amount of dollars, and like I said, I was seeing proposals for like $15,000 to $20,000. That's just not realistic in our budget, and no one would come down in their pricing except for SICH. And
so did the village have a budget of $3,000, or was the village's budget approximately $10,000 split 3 ways?
The village was going this alone because we have the HF Intergovernmental Marketing Group, and we've been working with that HF group for some years. And it was the opportunity for us to, as I was having a conversation with SICH, just like, well, doesn't it make sense to have other entities that are related to us a part of this process? And the library immediately jumped on board saying, we want to be partners. So we always knew that they were going to be a partner in this. And so adding the school district, understanding that you just had a branding, we kind of thought, well, we'll at least give that opportunity to the board and to the administration to make that decision. So as for cost, if the school district decides to move forward about being a part of this, we understand. We wanted to make this an opportunity for us to be able to share in this process. So that's, we understand that.
Do you mind, I have 2 more unrelated things, but you mentioned that there are 3 parts to this, and that the way I read this presentation and the way you've presented this evening aren't meshing, so I want to clarify.
Sure.
It sounds to me the way you've presented this tonight is that each entity that would, if they chose to participate, would receive a brand solutions from SICH. They detail what they would give us, but it would be up to that group to decide whether or not they wanted to use it.
Correct. It's a recommendation.
Sure, I understand,
So,
except
right.
I feel that it seems like an inefficient use of funds if you're not planning on forcing an umbrella under which all those organizations would work. And the idea that we could pay for this and then wait on that information, if we decided not to use it, we didn't like it, we thought it wasn't useful, but then maybe 5 years later when that data is no longer useful or current, and to then not use it, and then have something that we could go our own way with anyway, it just feels to me like your umbrella has holes in it.
Well, the umbrella has holes in it only because it was a concern that we didn't all want to have the same look. And so everyone, because you have your school district, you have your village, and you have your library, and they all have different purposes and services. So what might make sense for a library may not make sense for the village, but there's continuity in that. It can be the color scheme, it can be the font, it can be the tagline. There might be a continuity to all 3 that when you're outside the community and you see that, you know that's the village of Flossmoor, regardless if it's the school district or the library. However, when it comes to implementation, that's it. I can't set your budget, and so as a village, I can only say, at this part, phase 1, we can all come in this together. Phase 2, that's the next step. Is that something you want to move forward with as a board? And if you say at this time we can't, then that's understandable. We understand that. But as regards to the project as itself, this is just the research. This is not implementation. So I don't want to step over, I don't want to make assumptions that you're moving forward with that into implementation if that's not what's been given to me as being the next possible, and not being implemented right away. I mean, I'm hearing someone say, well, we just implemented this logo 3 years ago. It hasn't had enough time to, saturate the area. And I'm saying, well, I hear you, but there wasn't research done to say if that's the right logo for your entity and so forth. But this is giving you the opportunity to look at that and to assess that and to make that decision as a board. Because as the village, we don't want to be dictating to you what you should do moving toward next, but we hope that we can continue as partners together through this process. It's not something that we're saying that it's a must in order for us to start the phase 1. We're just saying phase 2 and phase 3 has not yet arrived, and we don't know what that might look like down the road, so I don't want to make that assumption today.
Okay, I'm done for now. I have more, but I think I'm done for now.
Thanks for coming, thanks for giving us the highlights of the proposal, and thank you for considering us for this opportunity. I think this is predicated, a lot of it based on the executive summary, that there is an identity crisis or a lack of cohesive identity with regards to the village of Flossmoor. I'm not convinced that's the case. I'm not convinced that's our problem, if there even is a problem as a community. So without that foundation, a lot of this doesn't fit together for me. And the other fact is that, as you highlighted, we do service the community of Flossmoor, but we service 5 or 6 other communities as well, in part. And so I'm not sure that we're the village and the library to come up with the solution to the identity issue, that same solution then translates into our school district. It might, but I think the uncertainty there and the fact that I'm not convinced it's a problem or an issue lead me to be kind of wary of moving forward. But again, I appreciate your presentation and I appreciate you bringing this opportunity to the district. So thank you.
No problem. And I just want to end by saying I don't think the village has an identity crisis or identity problem. I think when it comes to marketing, we just have never marketed ourselves. And when someone says,
I won't argue with that.
When someone says, are you from HF, they don't realize that Flossmoor is not Homewood. And so why is that? Because we've really never done much of marketing of ourselves. We've always been fortunate enough to have the high school and Park District and Homewood. So it's become where we want to be able to say, we are Flossmoor. Darn it. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity. Oh, sure.
Do you mind if I go first? Okay, so this is more of a comment. I guess I would also like to echo my appreciation for your coming. I think that coming from an art background and from an advertising background, I absolutely see the logic in what you're doing. I think it's a great idea. I would like to have some continuity with our school district. It is, as you say, it's true. We do pull from different communities. My one concern that I had is that, and again, this could just be a matter of, well, it's one of the price we got, is that while I agree, yes, this looks like a great company to do audits and sort of things like that, I don't think wouldn't be my first choice as a marketing company. And I think that if we were going to spend the money, which I'm not suggesting we are, that I would want to see, what our options are. Because I think that if, the same logic, you may have a fantastic plumber, I would not hire him to do the plumbing, to do the electricity. So I generally like to have people that they're an expert in that area. I do think that, the information you're talking about would be very valuable. Mm-hmm. And, maybe this is a consideration that a year or two down the road, if you let us know how things are going, if at that point we could tap into your data, I would be willing to consider that at that time. But I would want to be, as a board, I would want us to be more part of the decision-making process for who the actual firm we go to. And then at that point, we could have more buy-in with that.
No, I understand, and I just want to let you know that SICH, the marketing team, those individuals, that's all, they're our marketing. They have over 10 plus 20 years, if you saw the bio. They are not just employees of SICH, they were actually bought out by SICH. They had their own marketing and graphics house. So they are experts in that area, and I totally understand what you're talking about, and that's the reason why for phase 2, which is implementation, it will be a different process than just doing the research phase, because we do understand we want to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our bucks when it comes to the actual implementation of that look. So thank you again. I won't keep you all, but appreciate your opportunity. Did you have
I did. You're really, it is just a question. You don't have to have an answer for it. But I'm listening to everything that's been said, and is the village prepared for this, if they move forward with this survey, for the survey to come back and it to say that HF is really what we should be pushing and not Homewood and Flossmoor as two distinct communities? Or is the village set on this being a Flossmoor identity? Has this been set with that?
This is a Flossmoor identity. We have a separate entity that deals with the HF identity.
I understand that.
And we do before the survey will be done, there's going to be a focus group. So that focus group is going to help develop the questions for the community survey. So there's going to be some questions dealing with the HF identity. And so that will be addressed, but this is focused solely on the village of Flossmoor.
So the village has already decided that this is a Flossmoor marketing strategy and
That's
not
correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. I guess from here, I would ask, it seems like the general consensus seems to be in the majority of not pursuing this at this point. If there is a radical change in this, and we wish to address this again, certainly please let me know and we can revisit this as a board. But
this is not something we have to vote on to the board meeting, correct?
yeah,
So,
this
yeah,
is
so we're
something.
gonna have time to.
Absolutely. So if we would like to move this ahead to a vote next board meeting, we can do so. And that's certainly a conversation that Dr. Duster and I can have as well, but please look for your input on this.
I really don't think it's not, we need to put it on the agenda for the board meeting to vote. It seems to be consistent or majority that this is not something that we're ready to go forward with right now.
Okay, well, in that light, I hope that you will keep us informed on your progress, and I wish you the best of luck. I think you're doing a great thing.
Thank you very much, and you will see that progress hopefully in the next 12 months.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Next on the agenda, we have a presentation from Mrs. Marks, who has summarized a chapter from Coming to Order, which highlights. Well, I'll let her take it from here.
Sure. So actually, this chapter of the book, every member of the board is fluent in, but it's a great review process for everybody in the audience. This is the book we use. It's called Coming to Order, A Guide to Successful School Board Meetings. The Illinois Association of School Boards puts it out. It's got lots of really rich information in it, and I know our fellow board members refer to it frequently. So we're going to talk about it tonight. Next slide, please. School board meetings have to comply with two legal pieces. One, the Illinois School Code, two, the Open Meetings Act. That's it. Illinois School Code has maybe 36 different acts in it, and it's subject to change at the will of our governing bodies. The Open Meetings Act stays pretty consistent with a few little tweaks. We are all required when we join a school board to take a test on the Open Meetings Act, so everybody here knows about it. It's great to go over it again, and we will. So the Open Meetings Act applies to all public bodies in the state of Illinois. They must conduct their meetings openly, at times and places convenient to the public, and with proper notice posted in advance. All discussions of board business must be held in public. All board action must be taken in public. That's it. You get those two rules, they're pretty simple. Next. But you can violate this. The main way you can violate this, 3 members of the board discuss board business outside of a regularly scheduled meeting. They're violating the Open Meetings Act. We can't do it. We won't do it. If you ever see anybody doing it, report them. Here's the basic rule. You don't talk in groups of 3, you don't group text, and you don't reply all about anything. Easy. Next. Types of meetings. There are 5 types of meetings for a school board. They all require a quorum of board members must be physically present for that meeting to occur. For us, we have 7 board members. That quorum equals 4. 4 members must be present in a meeting room for that meeting to take place. Someone can be on the phone, they can vote, they can't make up a quorum. So we have regular meetings, like what we have the second Monday of every month. Those are scheduled a year in advance, or on a yearly basis. That schedule is made public, the times are made public, they're posted on the district website and in our district offices. Those agendas that go with those regularly scheduled meetings, those have to be posted, you're gonna hear this number a lot, 48 hours in advance. So a rescheduled meeting. In order to reschedule or change a meeting, the notice of that rescheduling must be posted 48 hours in advance. That's for a one-off exception. If the board decides to change set meetings, a large group of set meetings, then that requires 10 days notice. That has to be posted in exactly the same manner on the district's website and at the district offices. Special meetings. The board may call a special meeting. The special meeting may be called by the president or by any 3 board members. If a special meeting is called, written notice must be given to all board members. Public notice must be posted, you know it, 48 hours in advance. Reconvened. Any regular or special meeting may be adjourned and reconvened at a specific date and time. Then it's just a continuation of the meeting. That can happen when it gets to be 2 o'clock in the morning. Conversations aren't over yet, the board's growing weary. You can decide to reconvene that meeting. It has to be held before the next regularly scheduled meeting occurs. Otherwise, you'd have to adjourn, end that meeting, and start a new meeting. Let's see, reconvened, we just did. Emergency, of course, things happen. Emergency meetings to discuss items of an immediate nature have to be noticed up as practical, as soon as they can be. And then closed meetings, we have one of those scheduled for tonight. Open Meetings Act specifies the specific exempted topics that you can go into. The book lists 15 of them. Personnel, student issues, land purchases are pretty much the 3 big ones we deal with. That requires, during the regularly scheduled meeting, a majority roll call vote of a quorum present to vote to go into that closed session. All right? Pretty clear? All right, next. So closed meeting rules. Once you go into closed session, first rule, discussion is limited to specific items cited in the motion to go into closed session. Second rule, final actions discussed in the meeting, those actions must be taken at a regularly scheduled meeting in public. They don't have to be taken that night or following that meeting, but they have to be taken in public. The third rule is that during that closed session, an audio or video recording must be made and written minutes must be taken, and all of that must be kept for a minimum of 18 months. So those people that are in that closed session, think of it like this. Next slide. What's the first rule of Fight Club? You do not talk about Fight Club. What's the second rule of Fight Club? Come on. You don't talk about Fight Club. You don't talk about what happens in closed session, ever. Only in closed session. Next one. So, what are the minutes? Why do we have them, and what must they include? You may notice the names of the people I chose to share this with. Claire says the minutes are the official record of the acts of the board. They must state the date, the time, and the place of the meeting. Peter says the minutes are the only recognized record that a meeting took place. No minutes, no meeting. Zoe says they must include the names of all the members present, any member absent, and anybody attending via phone, and the type of meeting being held. That would be the 5 meetings we talked about. Frank says the minutes also must summarize all discussions and record the specific details of the motion and the votes. Minutes are not a verbatim recording of what was said in a meeting. All right? So, you'll hear sometimes that it was the majority of the board, the majority voice of the board. When does the majority of the board speak? They speak in public, and only in public. So you can't see my little cartoon, but it says, all those in favor of what we discussed in our email thread at Larry's son's birthday party, say aye. Yeah, you can't do that. You can't discuss it anywhere but in here. And if anybody in the audience thinks, I never heard the board talk about that, they have the right to ask that question. All right, next slide. How can board members communicate outside of this? Well, 2 is too many to discuss, more than 2 is too many to discuss board business. So 2 members can communicate any way they want to outside of a board meeting, without breaking the law, unless you have committee, and 2 is a majority of a quorum of that committee. If you have a committee of 3, 2 people still can't discuss the items going on in that meeting. All right, next. So what can board members talk about in the group? What can we communicate through emails or group text or emails usually? We can have agenda item suggestions. We can do board meeting agenda or public record information concerning agenda items. We can do reminders about meeting dates, times, and places. And we can do individual responses. We can share those to questions posed by community members. Anytime you're just sharing information, that can be done as a group. It can't be answered to the group. All right? What's not okay in electronic communication? The 3 Ds. Deliberating, debate, and decision-making. You can't do that in a group message outside of a public meeting. All right, so for something completely different, we have a little taking care of business sign up here. So, taking care of business. What does the board do when it takes care of business? First, it establishes board procedures. Now, the school code allows for ample discretion as to how the board conducts its meeting, as long as it's within those legal parameters. We decide on a full committee structure. We could do it different ways. That's what we've chosen to do. Then we need to periodically review and discuss how we agree to operate, what those agreements are. Once we continue on with those agreements, we make sure we include them all in the board policy manual. We make that manual easily accessible to the public, and we include the board agreements in there. They are on our website. They're under the Board of Education tab and in the pull down, and they're all in there. They're about, I think, 26 different pieces to the Board of Education that would include that in ours. All right? That's it. Everybody's probably read this. If you have questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, you have to. And this is available to the public online, as are all our policies. So you can always look and see. All right.
Thank you, Mrs. Marks.
My pleasure.
Are there any questions? Comments?
No, appreciate it.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have a discussion.
There's a question.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Are you about to go into closed session?
No.
Okay, could you just let us know, because we'd like to make a final statement before you do so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Next on the agenda, we have a discussion of dental insurance.
What we have is a look at our premiums for the dental insurance that actually starts on January 1st. Right now, we have a proposal, actually, we asked for a 2-pronged proposal from Delta. The first one is the normal way that we've been doing business, which is a fully insured dental plan. It would have no rate increase, which is a good thing. However, and this is the big however, I believe that we're losing money on a fully insured plan, that we are large enough and we should be going to a self-insured plan. They've been giving us rates based on $168,000 worth of claims, and since I've been here, we've never gone over $140,000, which means the balance of that is just pure profit for the dental company. And from the numbers that we've been looking at, if our claims hold the way that they have been, which we have no reason to believe that they won't because the plan is really pretty restrictive, you stand to save about $30,000, at which point in time we'll start having a conversation about either reducing the premiums, or even possibly changing the plan design to add a few more benefits for the employees if that's the way the board chooses to go. But at this point in time, my recommendation is going to be to stay with Delta. The plans would stay exactly the same. Nothing would change from the perspective of the employee, but we would self-fund that plan, which means we would pay a $747 per employee per month fee, and then we would pay the actual claims as they come in. Questions?
And this is probably my very limited insurance knowledge though, is there insurance that we can give for dental the same as medical, that it starts at a certain cap, so we, like, we can claim up to a certain point and then we engage an insurance company?
Yeah, well, that's a good question.
You mean like a pool?
Like a secondary.
Yeah, secondary, so like,
yeah.
we get
An
insurance
aggregate.
up to like 140,000, after that, when things start getting big, there's.
An aggregate, yeah. I don't know if there is a third. Well, let me look into that, because I'll have that before the next board meeting, and I'll talk to our broker to see if there is just a secondary insurance over that. No, that's actually a really good question. Let me take a look at that.
If we were to go self-insured though, we could design or create some type of pool equipment reserve with the money that we're saving?
Oh, yeah,
if that were to
that's,
happen?
and that's exactly what would happen. What would happen is the money would actually go into a liability account and sit there. And we would use that to pay the claims and the fees. So you'd still have the employee piece coming in, you'd still have the employer piece coming in, and it would be sitting in a reserve fund, if you will, and that fund would be used to fund all the claims. And again, like I said, we're looking at our experience going back, and I've been riding Delta for the last 3 years going, I understand you're coming in saying there's no increase. I'm looking at you and saying there should be a decrease. And I haven't been able to get them to move, so that's what we're looking at.
What I've done in the past with that too is you have that liability pool that Frank's talking about. That would be dedicated every year as far as the budget would go, so you know how much is in there.
I'll look into that.
Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item, the copier agreement.
Yes, the last 4, 5 Xeroxes in the district are now coming up for the leases expiring. We continue to have the same problems with all the Xeroxes that we had in the past that we don't seem to see with most of the Canons. What indeed we've actually seen is for buildings that have both a Canon and a Xerox, the Xeroxes are being left alone and the Canons are picking up a lot of the volume. So we end up having overages on the Canons and no volume on the Xerox. So what we're looking at is this would actually start balancing that out. Also, instead of just having a pool of overages for these 5 and these 5, Proven would put it all together so that we would have one huge look, and instead of on a quarterly basis like we were with the Xerox, where you end up with those downtimes where you don't have a whole lot of copies, and then you have those times a year where you have a lot, so you go over here and you really could have made it up here. It would have been a whole year's look at, so you'd have an entire year's worth of looking, so you would kind of even out the year so that hopefully we would not have an overage cost. Additionally, the lease and the maintenance agreement together would actually be $240 less than our current structure.
And Ms. LaBelle, would you please inform the board again why we are going with another vendor besides Xerox?
Well, we are currently have Xerox with COTG, they do not sell Canons. And like I said, our experience with Canon has just been overall better fit. There's less breakage, there's less overheating, there's less jamming.
There's a lot of frustration at the teacher level when they're making up copies of the Xerox, if you remember that a few years back. So this has helped.
So that'll be our recommendation.
Are there any comments, questions? With that, we move to the.
I got a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, in looking at this, will you over time phase out then the Xeroxes? Will they be completely?
This would be the end of them, this is the last 5.
Okay.
Further comments, questions? Okay, with that, we will now move to discussion of review of policy 740, non-public school students, including parochial and homeschool students. Mr. Duster?
We had a request that was made from a parent in regards to asking if their student could participate in extracurricular. And 7:40, it states that all of these requests for attendance need to be done, that school year must be done before May 1st. So with the current guidelines that we have in place, the decision to that request, or the answer to that request is no. So we bring that up at this point for discussion with the Board of Education.
The current policy doesn't allow for any leeway or discretion on the part of the superintendent.
It does not state that, no.
So in situations where you have a parent that may, after May 1st, decide to put the child prior to school, things like that, the policy states as it is, that this is, the answer is no, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Has there been any previous waivers where the board waives the deadline, the May 1st deadline?
Dr. Workus, there's never been a waiver. Was there one time where?
For early entrance, which is a different policy, there was a waiver. There was a family that moved from Georgia to here. And so the early entrance of April 1st, which is a different policy, was waived because they were not in our attendance area. But the policy, since Dr. Duster and I have been here for the May 1st partial enrollment, has not had any exceptions.
This is my 9th year. I'm unaware of any exemption that's been made to this, this policy, nor am I aware that this has changed in any material way in that period of time.
Is there, do we know whether in the past there have actually been previous requests? And those have all been denied?
That's since we've been here. Yeah, this is the first one that's ever made it to me, actually. So usually they speak with Dr. Work and curriculum, she lets them know about this, and it is denied at that point, it's not carried to me.
And the requests have been specifically for participation in extracurriculars?
With all of our home schools, yes.
Now, let me ask just a quick question to clarify. So the band program, that is not part of our regular school day. It is not a class that's taught like art or it's a special. This is something where it's after school. We do hire a band director or someone to, how does this structure? Maybe you could.
I believe it was a year ago that the band program was moved within the school day at Parker Junior High, so it does occur within the regular school day.
Okay, so in a sense, it's kind of like a special because it is part of our curriculum. Is it a class you can sign up for?
I'm asking.
It's not part of the special, we don't want to, just.
Well.
I know what you're saying. It is an extracurricular band, that's what it's known as, and it does partake after school. The band would, go ahead.
It's during the, yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clarifying understanding in this particular case, not athletics, but bands, they actually get a grade for this. This is a class they attend, they have classes for their individual instrument during the day, and then they actually have band class during the day. It is not after school.
There are different band things after school. Yeah, it's kind of both, and as far as.
Sixth grade band.
There's sixth grade band.
During the day.
Yeah, that's during the day. So other bands could be after school, for example.
Only reason I'm lost, and I'm board hat, but children in Parker, I'm trying to understand. We have.
Mr. Kennedy, could you explain, or Mr. Neminsky, your band and which ones are after school, et cetera? Because we have bands taking place.
The elementaries come over, I'm probably going to get this wrong because I'm on the spot. The elementaries come over, I believe in it starting in October, and they practice after school, 4th and 5th grade. I believe on Mondays, that's been the past practice. They practice from 3:15 to about 4:15, 4:30, I believe. Orchestra students come over, I believe, a couple of times a week, also after school. That is from the elementary, and some of those practice, and that's a 5-6. So the 5th graders come over and join our 6th graders who are already there after school. The 7th and 8th grade orchestra practice takes place during the day, during the enrichment period from 10:13 to 10:56, because they have a common enrichment time. So I think I'm getting most of it there. I do know that the elementaries come over several times a week, one for band, and I believe that's one day, and an orchestra a couple of times a week as well.
I have a question. How widely publicized is the May 1st deadline?
It's on the website underneath our board policies.
So if I'm a parent and I have never ever been out of the district before, and all of a sudden I go out of the district and I want for partial enrollment, is there anything that's sent home on an annual basis, saying that if you know, just like you're doing for signing up for, what am I trying to say, when you're registering kids, each year there are enrollment papers that have to be, they're annually, they're sent out. Is there anything that is sent out, again, I'm asking on an annual basis, that will put this information in front of parents consistently where they would know it?
No, we utilize the posting on the website. There's a lot of things in board policy. If someone were to contact us, then we would allow them. If they didn't find it on there, then we would tell them that. Like early entrance, for example, that was already discussed.
So this is not in the book that they get every year when the kids come get enrolled? They get a book every year?
No, it's always been the policy of the district to have it either in policy book, and we started posting policy 4 years ago on our website.
Okay, I have a question. So when parents who have been in the district for a while and they have a certain set of expectations, when they pull their kid out to go into private school, are they clearly notified that, okay, you're also pulling out of all these extracurriculars, and that it's made explicitly clear to them that you will not be able to participate in this unless you follow these procedures?
I don't know if the school knew that they were pulling out. The first time this.
We're talking about the parents aren't required to would trigger any kind of response.
Here's my,
I'm sorry,
here's why I'm asking this
I just want to
question.
be very clear that this conversation, we're talking about policy and not a specific issue at this particular moment, and not a specific student. Just because I'm going to make sure
Right,
that we're
you're
staying at
exactly
this
correct.
level. So if there's a policy change, or if there's a policy issue, we need to address the policy. And if we need to address an individual student, we should be doing that.
Okay, and that's maybe where I'm going with this in terms of, I don't want to confuse procedure with policy. And I think that, again, our policy is written specifically so that we have a very clear understanding. It's in one place. It sends a very clearly articulated message to the superintendent. This is your expectation, and this is what you should fall back on if in question. And it seems like there's some other things that we're talking about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're talking about procedures and not policy. There is no policy that requires parents to inform the school district if their student will not be attending school. If we had a policy like that, and we might have a procedure for how to deal with that policy, such a policy does not exist. A policy exists for non-public school students, including parochial and homeschooled students. That's the policy we have, and it's very clear. I think there's people take the responsibility of making themselves informed of what impacts their decisions, and I think it's very clear here.
Okay, given that, the reason why this has even come up has really come to, a discrepancy of, well, wait a minute, what does the policy say? Is this something that we want to address? Because 2 weeks ago, a month ago, 3 weeks ago, a decision was made, well, that's what the policy says. This has come back because it's come up again. And so it's not really the policy that we're looking at. I think it's very well written and very clear, but rather the procedure for when parents decide to pull their kid out of the district and their expectation. I just want to be, yes?
Are you making a proposal to create a procedure for this particular policy 740? I'm kind of lost at what we're doing.
Okay, I think that the conversation around 740 was, and correct me if I'm wrong from our discussion, that, is this an effective policy? Is this something we want to consider changing in some way? Does it serve the needs of the community? Where do we want to stand with this? I think that's where the conversation was, yes.
So if we tweak the policy to allow the superintendent at his or her discretion, to view this or make the decision on a case-by-case basis, what is the process of changing or tweaking this policy tonight?
Nothing tonight.
No.
Okay, so then what is the policy, so getting back to I think I'm trying to figure out, the goal of the discussion will get us to where?
Right, so if we were to change the policy, what we would do is we would put forth a revision for first reading. At that point, we'd say, okay, I have an issue with this, or I think this looks great, let's move this on forward to the next meeting, at which point, to act upon it, if this went all the way through, we're looking at 6 weeks for a policy change, which would put us, let's say it's mid-November, if we wanted to change this. You follow?
I follow.
Okay. Yes.
So, and just putting a couple things at least to consider on the table, we're looking at this policy for a couple reasons. I understand. One is this policy as it's written right now does not give superintendent discretion as necessary. So it's written, if you don't meet this, that's our policy. That's what we follow. I also understand though that in the time that John's been on board, so 9 years, and then since you've been here, there have been no exceptions to that policy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But there have been requests, but there have been no exceptions. Okay. And then I know that there are some individual students that we will need to discuss outside of this meeting, so we can address that different. But are we looking at the revision of the policy because now we see a need? Are there more students going to homeschooling, and we're going to see more of these coming, so we're trying to be proactive? I'm just asking for some thoughts there from where people are looking at this discussion.
Yeah, it's a good question. Dr. Ward, can you talk a little bit about your homeschool students? Because we know who they are and how we work with them. We have I believe, a good relationship with them.
So we have had upwards of 6 students who have been partially enrolled at our elementaries and at Parker throughout the time that Dr. Duster and I have been here. As that happens, that policy states they need to let us know by May 1st. So they come in and they do all of their registration and indicate at that time what classes they are interested in partaking. There have been art at the elementary, PE at the elementary, band at the junior high. So it just, chorus was one time we had drama. So it just really depends on what the family is looking to help round out that education for their homeschooled child. We haven't really had anyone in the parochial school system take advantage of that. It has been, since I've been here, parents who are homeschooling. So what we do then, and after they indicate at that time, then we have and get information to the principals about who will be partially enrolled in their school and what they are looking for. And then communication then goes to the building principal and whoever that homeschool family is, so that they can partake in all of whatever extracurriculars they have asked to participate with. So what has happened in previous years is with those families, after we have all of that established, we agree upon a time in April that we will touch base again to make sure that we have that determination by May 1st if they will be participating in our schools again. So it's something like after they get in the system, we at one point in time did have a family that had more than one child, and they had enrolled one of their children, and then after that May 1st deadline, they had asked to have their other child enrolled, but at that time we said, we're sorry, it didn't occur by this May 1st deadline, and that child did have to wait until the next year to partake in those services.
So my question is, do you see a need for us to do any tweaking of this policy based on your experience? I mean, it seems to me that there is a policy, a procedure that's already in place that seems to be working, except for that one exception with the parent. Do you see where in that situation it would have been better for you to have a exception in there that gives the superintendent or yourself discretion to waive that May 1st date, because their one child was already in the program, what would it hurt to, and it's consistent for that other child. Do you see a need for us to put an exception in the policy for discretion?
It's always good to have discretion when you're making these types of decisions. This is not, it's not been an issue. It's an unusual request at this time. So that would be the only suggestion that I would have, would be discretion that could be built in. The problem comes in, though, is that band, time this were to be passed, and we could forge ahead and do something of that nature, but by the time this would be passed, the child would be, it'd be the end of November.
No, we're talking about in general, for
Yeah.
just future purposes, not a specific student, just in general. Should we, since the proposal is here, that we review it and make any kind of recommendations? Is a recommendation that we amend it to include discretion?
I have a lot of discussion in other policies. This one, it just doesn't coincide, so I would follow this one as of right now.
Well, if I'm correct in reading this, there's discretion involved in the space available basis, but there is a timeline set for when the request must be made. So I'd like to know how the other members feel on this, because it's kind of philosophical, but with allowing discretion in a deadline date, to me opens itself for possibility of accusations of favoritism, of unfair application of the rule. I think discretion where numbers can be involved and data can be involved, and you can say we cap this program at 60 kids and we're at 59, you applied by the right date, we have space, or it's at 60, but I think we can handle 61. That's different than making a date flexible. That's the concern I have. I'm queasy about policies that can be bent to shape someone's world down the line. These policies should last.
Ms. Merrill, then this one.
Two things. One is, what good is a deadline if nobody knows about it? If it's not being put out there, if you tell me to just go to the website where I can find it, it's not any good. I mean, parents should be notified. I heard you say, Dr. Ward, that you make sure that you all communicate with the parents in April so they will.
For my current partially enrolled.
But you make sure you communicate with your parents. So there is some kind of communication going on there in order for them to meet that May 1st deadline. But for someone who knows
those parents found out about the deadline to begin with.
But for someone or some people who don't know anything about it, you're talking about a notification.
So how do you notify people who you don't know of?
Right. Well, but it should be put out there in case of.
It is out there. That's
but
what we're saying.
On a website, it is not in our book. It's not in the book, in the student handbook.
But the people who get the student handbook are the ones who are students.
I get that, but when students are going to disenroll, or even if they are going to enroll, they're notified of certain deadlines.
But that's an assumption that the students disenroll. This policy applies to all school-age students who reside in our district, not who have disenrolled.
I get you,
So
but
this is
proper
Odom's point.
notification to me just they didn't know.
But so, and I appreciate what you're saying. So then my
And
question is,
if I'm a parent,
how
I'm
would
sitting in here
how
right
do you
now, I
envision that
know
notification?
now, but I wouldn't have known anything previous to that.
So how would you suggest we do that?
I suggest that we either put something out on an annual basis like we're doing registration, or I suggest we put it in a handbook somewhere so people can be properly notified. I don't think that sending you to a website that could be up or down and a whole bunch of information could be there is proper notification.
So because it's policy then, to follow that line of thinking,
Our
would you
student
recommend?
handbooks require that parents send back signed, written notification that they received the handbook.
So,
But that's all I'm saying.
No, I understand, but I'm trying to figure this out. So are you saying then, I'm suggesting, and I guess I could envision this, do you want to include an entire policy manual with the student handbook if you don't feel that the people would know to look for the policy or ask about the policy.
I'm just trying to figure out how the
handbook's fine,
practically, we're going to notify every possible resident who might have a school-aged child that this is our policy. I mean, do we send out a policy book to every household in the school district?
We make it available to them. Just
It
like
is
we're doing
available.
Our student handbook.
Okay.
We don't send them home, all of them at home, they're now available
Online. Like the
but we
board
make
policy.
sure that we get a receipt back stating that the parents have received them and read them. That's all I'm saying.
Go ahead.
What happens if if a student enrolls and they sign up for band and then they pull out for whatever reason during the course of the school year, or would they still be allowed to stay in band or any other extracurriculars?
What do you mean?
So if a student enrolled, went through the regular process, and then let's say October, for whatever reasons, that family decided that they were going to pull their child out and start homeschooling, would they still be allowed to keep their child in whatever extracurricular activities they signed up for?
That's an excellent question. We've never had that. The rule I would go by is if you start school on the first day from the Illinois code, then let's say you move to Chicago, say Frankfurt.
Outside the district.
Outside the district. You can finish the school year here, so that's how I would treat that. They could finish the school year.
But what if they didn't register at the beginning of school year? What if a student moved into the district today or enrolled their child, tomorrow morning and signed up for whatever classes, and then a month or two later they decided this is not the best situation and decided to pull their student out? Would they be allowed to remain in extracurricular?
Is that the scenario you highlighted originally? Or is that a
Yes.
different
It's
scenario?
the same scenario.
So they register late
They registered late.
after the school year's begun,
After the school year.
and then they pull out shortly thereafter.
Correct.
That may be an attorney question. I've never had to deal with that before.
Well, our May 1st is request for attendance for the following school year.
Mhm.
So if you're an enrolled student during the school year, I think that enrollment, like being resident in the district beginning the first day of classes, again, it's a lawyer question, I guess, but
So whether it happens in May 1st or October 1st, if a student enrolls.
it's for the next school year though. It's May for the next school year. So if you're already in the school, you're saying, I'm in school in this current school year, which covers 2
But I'm saying I
calendar
just
years.
enrolled. Let's say I just moved to Flossmoor.
And you enroll, and you
And
attend a
I
day of school.
enroll October 1st, I moved from a different state, I enroll October 1st, I sign up for band. December 1st, I decide this is not the best environment, but I still, for instructional reasons, but I do want my child to stay in the extracurriculars. How would the policy address that issue? Or is there a policy?
I don't know if there is a policy for that addresses that specifically. If someone were to leave like that, I mean, we'd definitely have a discussion with the parents to see, if they're gonna go to another school district for sure, then we would imagine that they would go off to whatever extracurricular that was, et cetera.
I think
Yeah, I just-
that would certainly trigger a discussion along the lines of what you highlighted. Now we're going to disenroll. Here's everything that's associated with that to consider. But that scenario and others might be where we revisit this on an official basis and tack those things on in some way, shape, or form, because it obviously isn't addressed specifically in here.
All right.
My earlier question about if we're seeing a trend in one way or the other, the only, what's gnawing at me is a bit on this part about, I don't know. So if I'm going to remove my child from the school system, it's, as a parent, you kind of find out a lot of those implications. It is out there on board policy, and where I have a challenge is if we do not have we have a deadline there, and then at what point do we now say, okay, let's change, okay, let's keep moving back, Okay, now, okay, June, okay, so you didn't know, so you get to come in September, okay, you didn't know, you get to come in October, or you just found out because your friend told you, so you get to come in November. What does that do to the class dynamics? What does that do to the size? What does it do basically just to a policy that now has no reason to exist? And that's the only, and I'm strictly going by policy. This is even not that exception piece that if there's some extreme circumstance, but right now we're talking about a policy that is in place that is accessible and available to parents, maybe not where you're saying, but it is out there for parents and it is available, and, you know, and we don't know every child that's gonna disenroll unless they tell us. That's where my challenge comes in. You know about your homeschools. If that person enrolled and decided to take them out, they're not in school for 2 weeks, we kind of know that they disenrolled. There's a conversation, but we don't know to tell people, like, call them up and tell them that. So it is truly a policy piece that I'm struggling with about, and especially if we haven't made any exceptions in the past, I'm struggling with what this policy should look like to be at its best. And if it has a deadline, there's a deadline for a reason. So.
And I think that there's no way anything in any industry or any place in the world that can meet, you can address every possible scenario that could possibly ever come up. That would just be ridiculous, you know, because life is so uncertain. So this, to me, is clear. It addresses a particular issue clearly, and it's unfortunate that we have this issue of notice that we can't address because it's just not even practical to think of we're gonna find out every possible household in Flossmoor or in the school district and notify them personally about this particular policy. Because we have loads of policies and procedures that somebody is not going to meet the deadline for. And I know, based on the years of experience that I've been educating, my oldest child is 29, and I know from all of the talks that parents do not read this until it's important to them. They don't read these policies until it's actually practically important to them. And then they open up the book, or they go online and they look it up and they find out the information that they need to do what they need to do. Otherwise, we'd be wasting paper, wasting time, wasting resources, sending it out to, you know, somebody who might be interested.
And then let's go here, and I'm sorry if I could just say the same, because I understand you know, we're not this huge, we're not the Chicago public school system, we're smaller. We want to be able to accommodate every child here, you know, to do our best for our children. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's what all of us are here. And I do balance that. What is policy stating? Why is it stating that? Why is it in existence? And is a need for? And then when there are necessary reasons for exceptions, like we're one over. There's an exception, we've got to go to a class one over. The challenge I am having is with the deadline piece, because it can get you on a slippery slope, and then you do get into positions where you start questioning on favoritism, on why did you give that person, what is the reason behind you letting them go for June 1st, you letting them go for September 8th. Maybe we could go down a slippery slope.
Well, I think the policy is clear as well. I think if there was room for superintendent's discretion, then we wouldn't even be having this kind of conversation right now. So if there was an opportunity to allow the superintendent to have a little bit of discretion, it doesn't change the policy. It doesn't change that this is a deadline-driven policy. It offers the opportunity to make, and right now, there's no opportunity to even make an exception or to even hear, you know, an exception. You know, so we just wouldn't even be having this conversation if there was the opportunity for Dr. Doster to do that.
So are you saying that possibly we need to add discretion? Is that what
I would advocate for adding discretion.
Yeah, me too.
What would you see that discretion looking like?
I think however we have written it into previous other policies that allow discretion, I mean, it could be a sentence that we add in there that, you know, that states that at the superintendent's discretion, or that exceptions, maybe not even using the word exceptions, but that there is an opportunity for superintendent to use discretion as noted, or as, I don't know what the language should be, maybe we need to consult an attorney, but I think the policy is very clear with the exception of, if it was as clear as we think it is, we would not be having this conversation right now.
I think that the policy is very clear, and I'm not a big advocate for changing policy. It seems to me that this might be a communication piece and practice that, could be a discussion in the future. But in terms of, because I think that once we get into, the discretion of the superintendent, then it really comes down to, well, forget the policy, what is the superintendent?
But we have that on other, he just mentioned that we actually he has that flexibility on several other.
So I have a concern about how that might play out. If it said there was discretion of the superintendent, and if the discretion of the superintendent trumped the policy, and the parent was not happy with the superintendent's decision, then the parent would be done, or would that?
No.
Then it puts the board in the position of trumping its own policy, which
How does
is.
this work on current policies where there is discretion written into the policy?
Exceptions can be, one of them for permissive transfers. That's a discretion, and there's a criteria for that. And basically, we allow them to go through if there's harm to the child, something of that nature. And if we deem that that's not the case, then they are rejected the request.
Just one final thing, and I think, I don't know that a parent, and I can't remember, a parent said it actually best for me tonight, which is this is not about one person, this should not be the decision of one person. And I think by allowing that, you do get into, well, it's now Craig Duster's decision whether this person can miss this deadline or this person cannot. And I think then you do get into what is policy state as opposed to what is now Dr. Duster doing.
Well, except the superintendent is charged with implementing the policy that the board sets.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking at is a circuitous process that has no end.
I'm
Because-
just saying that I'm saying that it was
Okay.
stated, which got me to thinking, which is, okay, we put this question in here, what is the criteria for that, what does that look like? And then you start getting into, well, is it, as opposed to policy, what does it think? So
Well, okay, and I'm saying that once there's policy and the superintendent implements the policy, we're done. So the board should have, further conversation about any subject that's been clearly, when policy has clearly been followed.
Your point
Thank
is
you.
taken. I think that's the same case on the example you just gave, where he does have discretion. I mean, it could always be this, but we can't allow.
But when the policy states there's discretion, we agree to allow the superintendent to use his discretion, and we don't, that's what I'm saying, we stop the circuit.
So in terms of the policy, are there any other questions, or we move forward on this?
Well, what do you mean by move forward?
Well, move to, I guess
We
that's
don't
a good.
need to.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like there's not a majority interest to move forward to change the policy as it stands right now. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Okay, it seems to be that way. So in terms of the policy itself, I think this is a good discussion, and if there's no further questions or comments on that, I'm going to move forward to the next agenda item, which is building school improvement plans.
Hello, everyone. Let me set up. See if the PowerPoint is going. So as this is coming up and we're getting set, every year, the buildings work on a school improvement plan that is aligned to the district's overall plan. And this, I will give you highlights before the buildings come up as to our process and what it does look like and entail. Here we go. Perfect. So
every year, in order to get ready to work on school improvement plans, there is a process and a system in place that really assists all of the buildings in getting ready for that. We have 2 data retreats a year. This year, one occurred on June 9th, and the other one occurred on August 3rd. And again, one of our parents had referenced the SMART goal format. And with our process, there's 2 by the S, and it's strategic and specific, measurable, attainable, right now I just blinked on the R, reliable, and time-bound. Thank you. And so the only difference with ours is that the S, we make sure that it is strategic and specific, everything that we are doing. We have 3 monitoring and reporting periods throughout the year, and what that means is that each building comes to district office, reports out to Dr. Duster and his cabinet on the progress that they are making on their school improvement plan and the data. So it is visited regularly by the buildings and their teams. Coaching, we have coaching from Smart Systems, who we are working with, that has trained all of our principals, and currently Mr. Kennedy is going through that training. So we make sure that that is part of the process. And then we have teams of teachers going through SMART processes for classrooms, and they also are trained and coached in the SMART process as well. And then all of our grade level teachers have goals directly aligned to that school improvement plan. So we have that system in place. What we know about SMART goals is that they do focus on those few things that are most likely to have that greatest impact in the classroom. And it's part of a continuous improvement process. Why SMART works, it really helps us focus on our greatest area of need, and you will hear everyone get up and start to talk about their GAN. When they talk about their GAN, it is the greatest area of need. And you will note, as you know, our schools are all different, so they are not all going to have the same GAN, or the greatest area of need. We make sure that we focus on short and long-term goals so that the schools and our teachers and the students can see results quickly and again continuously, part of that continuous process. Again, we look at that alignment, that their SMART goals are linked to the district strategic plan, that then the school is linked to the district, the classroom is linked to the school, which then links it to the district, and then work on classroom and personal and professional efforts to make sure that alignment is all there. And again, our results oriented, focused on improving our students' learning. So we make sure that our indicators are observable, that we can actually see that there's evidence that our goal is being achieved, and that skills, knowledge, and performance are really leading to proficiency and or growth. And again, we look at different measures, tools that are used to monitor the progress towards the goal, and each of our plans do have those specific measures as to what those indicators are. Our targets are short-term and incremental steps to meet that goal, and the targets are set for each measure. Then, based on the data, we always ask, is this attainable? And they use those 2 data retreats and then conversations throughout the year to help see that we are getting there. And then, based on research, really what is attainable and how do we make sure that we're meeting that target? So again, how? These are questions that all of the buildings go through as they're getting this. How will we prepare to present our SMART goals, our indicators, our measures, and targets to staff at the beginning of the year? That has already occurred. All of the principals and their building leadership teams have already had those conversations with their staff. How will we help grade level and departments review the indicators, measures, and targets that apply to their work? That also goes with those monitoring visits, and every time the teams get together and prepare to get ready for those visits here, they're really looking at that data and actually preparing how is that applying to everything that they're doing in the classroom. How are we sharing out the school targets? There's different ways with different data walls and information that the principals can talk about. And how will we help each grade level team review its data and set grade level targets? So that's everything that this process works with. Again, this really looks at the alignment from the school goals and measures down to how action plans are in the classrooms and the teachers are working with students and setting goals. So we really look for this alignment in everything that we're doing. Strategies, we're really looking at the strategies, the best way to say it, how do we get the biggest bang for the buck? And those are things that we are always looking at with specific and stated, what is the impact that this strategy will have on that student learning? We do make sure that it reflects best practices and it's based on research. And we always tend to go back information that we've seen from John Hadding, really saying what is out there, what are the experts saying, and how do we know that this is going to help us achieve that goal? And then really we work with, is that a realistic goal? If we know someone has 3 years growth to make up, are we going to expect that student to make up 3 years growth in 1 year? Best practice would tell us that isn't realistic for us. And then again, being high yield, focused on student center and data, really looking for that measurable impact that we can have. School-wide strategies, you could see the implementation of the Illinois Learning Standards. That's something that we've been doing. The use of short cycle predictive assessments and when we're progress monitoring with students, and really saying we're checking in every other week with a student to make sure that they're making some of this progress. Really working with the district initiatives that have been set forth within our strategic plan. And then really implementation of PLCs. And that's been something really giving teachers that time to talk about their curriculum and what they're doing. Those are some implementation of strategies. You're familiar with our tree diagram? Do you have a question? Or? Okay. You're familiar with our tree diagram that you'll see in all of the school improvement plans. And as far as reading, when their strategic goal will be to achieve 100% of their targets that they have set for the building. So we, again, as the district, had set by school year 17-18 benchmarks for all of our districts to meet. And this was 5 years ago when we set this first goal. So they're all striving to reach all of that. Math, you'll notice the measures for math as well. And then we also have learning conditions or climate, which you all know is part of that strategic plan. When you work on the Plan, Do, Study, Act, I'm trying to see, I missed one of the target slides. I have to come back here because there was something that I wanted to say. With the targets, there's one thing that I really wanted to point out, actually two. When we're working with the targets, as you know and you've seen in the data that we present to you, we are focusing on spring to spring targets. And part of the reason that we're really focusing on those spring to spring targets is because we need to make sure when students are leaving here in May or June, what they're coming back like in that fall, and are we having any regression and recoupment? And so we've really had that focus to look on that spring to spring data. And you've also heard us talk about when our students on the map are meeting their goal growth, their growth goal at the 60% level, we're in the top 10% of the nation. And when we have met our goal at 70% and students are having that growth target and we're reporting out 70%, that's in the top 1% of the nation. The typical growth is 50%. So those are things that we look at with all of our targets as well. So with the Plan, Do, Study, Act, this is a cycle that you've seen before, and when we put up our school improvement cycle over this, it is all that continuous improvement process of Plan, Do, Study, Act, and we actually have one of the graphs that actually show us with the months and as to where we are with our school improvement planning process and cycle. So it's really giving all the information of when we're looking at baseline data, when we're goal setting with students, how the teachers are analyzing the data, really again brainstorming strategies for improvement. So this is really how we do our business. So at this point in time, I'd like to ask Mr. Kennedy to come up so he can start to talk to you about Parker's school improvement plan.
Good evening, everybody. I thought it was funny to make the new guy go first, but I need to get up and stretch. Works out okay. Dr. Wark, this one here on the left to advance?
Correct.
Okay. The last time we met in this room, we talked a little bit, we showed some of the data, so I'm not going to go through some of that again. But we did have some successes last year, and one of the things is the Kagan strategies, and I had to, last week, had my first encounter with that where we had our Kagan coach in, was able to walk around the building with her and see some of the good things that are being put into place in the classroom setting. And in addition to that, across the 3 grade levels, we did see half of our students exceeding their growth targets. So we did have some positive things that occurred last year. And our ELA and math departments have worked hard to create some common assessments. And this actually, today I was in my office and one of the math teachers was there and I was asking him about that, and they're actually much further along than I even envisioned, because I asked them if they had started to implement standards on their just common assessments and their unit assessments, and they are. They're looking at the depth of knowledge of all the questions, and they're also putting on the test what standards the questions are trying to measure, and so that's going to help the students see which areas they're weakest in, and we'll be able to provide feedback to parents instead of just saying, well, you missed number 2, number 6, number 7. They'll be able to tell them specifically what standards that they need a little bit more work with. So we're real happy about that. Looking at our data, some of the GANs, and I know Dr. Wark brought up that term earlier, that we are targeting for this upcoming school year is trying to go beyond the expected growth that NWA or math sets for our students and trying to reach those college and career readiness targets that would allow our kids to compete with other students, enabling them to get into public universities, having success on the ACT and so forth when they get to the high school level. And in math, the MAP test, I'm sure you have some familiarity with it, has different strands like number sense, algebraic expressions, and so forth. With working with our math department, we identified number strands as the one, number sense as the one strand that our students need to focus more on. And as you know, math is a building block type class. The thought process is that if they get the number sense down, it will permit them to have success in some of the other strands. And so what we've been recently doing with that, and the Parker teachers have done a phenomenal job of just kind of going off and running with this themselves, is we're creating data walls in the classroom. I've been so impressed that teachers have already kind of just took the ball and run with it already. And so they've created data walls looking at where their current students are at in their classes as far as their RIT scores are concerned. And what we're going to do, and I haven't had a chance to talk with the staff about it yet, but at an upcoming meeting, we're going to look at those bar graphs with the RIT scores on them and put a line across it showing where the NWA norm is, and then put another line on there showing where the college and career readiness is at. So that way all of our students are very cognizant of where they currently are and where we would like them to be come spring. And so that's going very well, and we're also going to be doing more data analysis looking at which specific strands our students are weakest in, so that way our teachers can target instruction to meet the needs of all the students. Because just because, let's say that 80% of our students are weakest, let's say in the number systems, 20% may be weaker in another area, so we can't just target all of our instructions to the number sense or number systems. We need to meet the needs of those other students in our classes as well. And then the culture and learning environment is a big area of focus. That's something we've definitely, I think, made huge strides on. And as I've talked to you all before, we need to make sure that our students are in an environment that is conducive to learning before we can start moving them forward for greater academic success. So that's what we're working on. Some of the action plans to Kagan, as we talked about a little bit before, just allowing students to be in an environment that is more conducive to learning. Increasing the rigor, that's something as we're going through the evaluation process. When teachers are turning in assessments to be approved for a type 2 and type 3 assessment, we're making sure that they're not just hitting those lower levels, such as recall and so forth. We're looking for more analytical questions on there. Greek, Latin roots, obviously, if they understand some root words, it will give them better vocabulary acquisition. And then, as I kind of referred to, looking at more analytical writing. The math, using the data-driven instruction, and a lot of that will be through analysis of those common assessments and through the map data. The Kagan strategies in conjunction with the number systems that we want to target. And we're very fortunate we're working with the South Cook Math Initiative. Her name's Paula. She's come in, observed our teachers and worked with them, and actually tomorrow our math department has further training with her. So, and then the Culture of the Champs, that's a classroom management strategy that our teachers are using. And as I go into classrooms, I definitely see it being implemented. They have it up. The kids can recite what some of the expectations and strategies are for that. So, any questions for Parker? Yes.
Just one, I would like to, you've been here for a little bit now, so you can tell me an update, the concern about those, the kids walking around with now, the people who are concerned about them having those, that detention slips.
The step sheets, yeah.
Have you seen any concerns with more teachers handing them out more than others? Have there been any trends that we need to keep an eye on? Or are they having a positive impact on, the board of all? So those little things that came out, I want to know.
Yeah, I feel they are. We talked a little bit before about the discipline, the new discipline process that we have. And I think what it has enabled our teachers to do is to handle more things at the classroom level to help build that relationship and rapport with the students. I think, and I'm not trying to, slam the policy that was in place before, but I think beforehand teachers felt as though most things had to be turned over to the office. And when that happens, it kind of removes that, repairing of the relationship, and it basically then forces the dean to try to feel like they have to escalate into a bigger thing. This way, through that step process, the teacher has more dialogue with the students, and I think things that beforehand may have resulted in some disciplinary actions along the lines of a detention or a Saturday school or something like that are being dealt with more at the classroom level. We have, a couple students that have, if you look at, we have a data wall up in our school as far as the discipline is concerned. I think if you look at some classes, there might be a total, out of, 300 kids roughly, there might be 44 steps across the whole grade, which is a pretty small amount because a lot of those steps are just warnings and so forth. But then if you look, it might be, there might be 3 kids that might have 6 steps apiece, so that accounts for 18 of them. I don't think we have that many with 6 steps, but sometimes we do have some concentration. And with that, we have had dialogue with the student, with the teacher. We've had parents in to try to come up with some strategies. We've actually implemented some interventions with certain students that have been, I think, pretty successful. So.
Mr. Kennedy, I have frequently visited, and this year there's a different feel when I walk in at the junior high. Teachers are smiling, kids are enjoying school. There's a lot of visibility with administrators. I know there's mobile labs that are out there. I've not yet talked or spoke with a teacher yet that has stated to me that they've not appreciated this year so far. What has been your take on the culture? That is the biggest thing at junior high, is building that culture and the relationships once that done learning can take place.
Well, absolutely, and it's, I am impressed every day by the young men and young women who are at Parker. They go out of their way to say hello to me. There were a couple students out there in the foyer when I first came in. Hi, Mr. Kennedy, and so forth. The way I always, my motto is that you allow kids to have freedom and responsibility, and if we have to make modifications from that, we can. It's kind of like, it's the old philosophy. If you treat people like you don't trust them, you treat people like animals, and they're going to act that way. And so I treat them with respect, with dignity, because that's what they're deserving of. Because I always try to look at it, like I said, if it was my own child there, I would want my own child treated with respect, and they have reciprocated tenfold. They have amazed me, and the staff has been so welcoming to me. It's been a very good relationship, and you know, we have some progress we need to make with the academics, and that will come. We are, you know, working with the staff and putting things in place during that PLC time. We're going to be implementing to try to move us where, you know, you expect us to be, where we need to be, where I expect us to be. So,
You know, the expectation from the board and yourself, of course, is excellence. So we'd like to appreciate that moving forward.
yeah, I don't want to be the less than a standard school by any means. So, yes.
Can you just repeat, just so that I'm clear on what you said before? I heard you mention something about students being aware of their college readiness score, so they can.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit more, and how will they know this? I mean, I think looking at growth is excellent, but where I'm challenged is that I don't know where we're trying to get them.
Right.
I don't know what the goal is. I mean, because I don't know where they're starting, so I don't know where it is they're supposed to be.
Right.
So by showing, this is what, I mean, so can you talk a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll try to give you as an abbreviated version, and hopefully still answer. If I don't, please let me know. Our teachers are going to be in the process of meeting with the students individually to do goal setting with them based upon their RIT scores. The students who take the math test take a reading test and they take a math test. And so the way it will work is that obviously the LA classes are focused on the reading, but it won't just be the LA classes. The social studies classes, the science classes, grades 6 and 7, health class and so forth, will all be working with the students on achieving certain goals. And then the other half of that obviously would be the math, our PE department, 8th grade science, because that's more mathematic in nature, will be working with those students. So the students will be cognizant of what their RIT score was for the fall. So in each classroom, there is going to be like a bar graph that shows RIT scores on there, and it doesn't have the child's name on there, it just has the RIT scores. Across those those vertical lines will be a horizontal line showing what the NWA norms is nationwide for a 6th grade student, let's say in the fall. And so kids can see, are they above the norm, are they below the norm, so forth. And then another line is going to be on there, and obviously that will be up higher, showing where we want our students to be in the spring as far as the college and career readiness. And that's through analysis, through research by NWA, saying if kids are planning on going to a state university, this is where they should be, because this equates to this type of score on an ACT. So we're going to have that, and then we're going to show another bar graph showing students who each have individual projections or proficiency goals. And generally in junior high, it tends to be 3 to 5 RIT points. And it tends to be students who are scoring lower, the expectation is that they'll gain 5 RIT points. The higher they are, they'll gain 3. And so we'll have another bar graph showing students' current RIT score, and then showing where we want our students to be to meet their goals, their individual goals as well.
So Mrs. Worth, you want to know the number?
Oh, the actual number? Well, those depend on grade level and so forth. I mean, I can get you that information.
If I could
Yeah.
stop, on the bottom of the sheets that's given to the board, when it has what our spring to spring growth is and by the school, at the very bottom of that sheet, those are the college and career readiness numbers right down there for the fall and the spring. So that's on the bottom of all of those sheets.
And is that based on the expectation for a 7th grader and 8th grader?
So it starts at 3rd grade, and math has all the way backtracked to 3rd grade and given those goals that if we are looking to be on track. So when I talked about what our district goals are that we had set for 5 years when we first started on that journey, we looked at what the mean RIT was for each grade level, and we already knew that we were above mostly what that national norm was doing, and so then what did we do to stretch ourselves? And that's where we actually set those goals to those college and career readiness, and know that, for example, when a 3rd grader comes in reading, it's a 205 that they need to have for that mean RIT in the fall, and then when they leave in the spring, I don't remember what the spring is because right now I've just been working with the fall. So when you're looking at that, we have those benchmarks in fall and in spring that we're expecting for that mean RIT to be, and the goal that we set across as a district was that state school.
Okay, and those are for acquisition goals, they're not necessarily growth goals. Those are norm across the nation or for that age group, they should be at this number. And so we can see in comparison where they are above it, how far above it, in terms of how many deviations one way or the other. That's very clear, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yes?
I don't have my notes in front of me, so I might not have the details right, but one of the takeaways I had from the presentation we had last month on some of the scoring that was coming in was identifying a problem in 6th grade at Parker, where we had a big drop. I think it was mathematics, but I'm not positive. Is there anything in your SIP or outside of the SIP that you are working on with your team to address that specific issue?
Well, we just recently got data in from the fall for our 6th grade students, and we saw another dip. And we first off we took a look at the students who were not in our district last year to see what their impact may be on our scores. It had a very minute impact. Our students, when they left, what we need to work on as a district, when our students left 6th grade, they were at, let's say, a RIT band of 225. When they took the test in the fall, when they left 5th grade, I'm sorry, they were at 225 when they left the feeder schools. When they took the test recently in the fall, they were down 10 RIT points. So we need to figure out what we can do as a district to prevent the summer brain drain, if we will. Because obviously the kids, we've only had the kids for 3 weeks when they took the math test. So it's not indicative of, the students have been with us for 6 months and they're showing a drop or they're showing regression. Because now, obviously, if a student is, I don't want to get too deep into it, but if a student was at 225 and you as a board or anyone sees the data for spring math scores, you're going to see 5th grade 225. Well, if in the fall they've taken 6th grade, they're at 215. We have to recover 10 RIT points just to get back to where they were. So sometimes if we go, if they go down to 215 and by spring we get them back up to, let's say, 228, well, it may look to the naked eye like, wow, they only grew 3 RIT points from the end of 5th grade to the end of 6th grade. But what it doesn't show is the fall to spring data that shows how the student progressed when they were with us in Parker. Is that?
Yes, that's enlightening. I'm not sure that's the same question about which I'm asking.
Okay.
My sense was it was a year over year. It wasn't a summer brain drain issue that was coming out of the data that we were provided. What I'll do is I'll go back and pull up the specifics and then
I think maybe
make
what
sure you have those.
I think maybe what you're talking about is what we talked about here, and that's where our math department, along with, like I said, the science and the PE department, are going to look at students on an individual basis and see where those students are weakest, which of the 4 strands within math they are weakest, and then we will target instruction to those students to help them raise their scores. So if math, well, we're going to do that. It's not just unique to math. We're doing that in reading as well. And I think what, I don't want to speak, it's hard for me because I wasn't there last year to say what was done. But I think what sometimes is commonly done is that they kind of look at the class as a whole rather than looking at it at an individual level. So in other words, you can run a report showing all the 6th graders who took the math. And by that, we could look at which of the 4 the strands they're weakest in. So let's say overall, the 6th grade class was weakest in, algebraic concepts. Well, that's all well and good, but if you're looking at it as a whole, there may be, 40% of your students that may not have been their weakest area. And, although targeting that one area will help everyone in general, we're going to see the greatest growth if we target the areas of greatest weakness or greatest areas of need, if you will, for our students. So I think by us going in and doing some more analysis, looking at the students at an individual level, and then putting an action plan or a plan in place to say, how are we specifically going to target those individual weaknesses for our students, it will help us achieve greater growth.
I have a question, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I have a question. You know, there's that summer regression that takes place. That's not only here, that's known that for 25 years for the kids. There's a lot going on with those individual schools going into Parker that 6th grade year. How did your 6th graders going into 7th grade, did you analyze that data over the summer? Was there regression as well?
No, it was pretty dramatic with the incoming fifth graders. We actually saw growth from our 7th graders who were with us last year in 6th grade.
With that, I think there's a dramatic shift socio-emotionally in terms of your environment going from, you know, a self-contained class to suddenly you are in an entirely different area. I mean, that is a big impact on 6th graders in that kind of transition.
Well, and the test itself is different.
That was my other point, is
Yeah.
that in 5th grade, are they taking the same test as they're taking in the fall in 6th grade?
They're not.
And this is, you know, I've had this discussion even with parents of my students who said, you know, well, freshman year, they're reading at the college level. Like, okay, well, they took a test for 14-year-olds. They're not taking a test for 21-year-olds. My own son got like an 1100 for Lexile based on, you know, a huge written number for reading, you know, 3rd grade material. I mean, it doesn't mean he's ready for college.
Yeah, and it's, you know, and obviously each grade level is taking a different test.
Right.
But in general, it's called like math with Common Core goals V 6.2. That's what we have throughout junior high level. At the elementary level, they have a different test, and then obviously within that, it's different per grade level. But that's something I think, you know, will be interesting to see, because, you know, math just included Common Core within the last couple of years, and much like, you know, the park, you know, I'm sure there's still maybe some tweaking of that to come. And I'm not making excuses, I'm just saying that's just the facts, is that the junior high students are administered a different test than they are at the elementary schools. So. Anything else?
Just have one last question. It's probably more for Amy, but you have a response.
Okay.
I'd like to hear too. So when teachers take a look at the scores, and then they sit down with each student individually, what is that conversation like? Like, what happens? I'm curious to know what the conversation is like between the teacher and the student that goes beyond, this was your score, we want to see you grow 10 points by spring.
Well, I can only speak to the way I envision it being, because obviously we just got the map data and we haven't done it yet. But students who are in a certain RIT band, they usually give a range, and the students have a general overall RIT score. Let's say the student is 205. One area they might be obviously 210, you know, whatever. So if you look at where the student is at, let's say the student's weakest area, their RIT score is a 190. NWA provides the skills that the student should need. It'll show a RIT range. Like, so let's say the student's at 190, and the next RIT range is 194 to 200. It will show what skills they would expect, they being NWA, for students to be able to exhibit within the next RIT range. And so what the teacher would do is sit down with the student and say, okay, you're at 190. This is the area we want you to help you grow on. These are the skills that you will need in order to help you move to that next level. And then obviously the next phase of that is the teacher providing the resources and so forth to help that student move up to that next RIT level.
So the teacher is doing that for every individual student. So after this conversation, the student should have, and hopefully at some point the parent should have some idea of what the path looks like to help them get to whatever that goal is.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
And so every student knows what their target area is and what their area of strength is. So if you would ask your children, what is your area, what is your target area, and what is your area of strength, That's something that all the teachers are working with. We had put that in place 3 years ago. And so 2 ways to help facilitate that is teachers can print off goal-setting sheets from MAP, but then a lot of our teachers wanted more in-depth information, and so then using that sheet, then have created their own sheets that they're using with the students that work on their targets and area of need. And so when you hear some of the teachers and or principals talking tonight about DDI strategies, that is part of those DDI strategies where then teachers then are taking that information to a different level and might be asking something on some of the classes. They might have, if that student has a target area, we've even color coded it to a different level, and a teacher might just be able to look and say, okay, they have pink, that is vocabulary. And then as they're working in the classroom, ask that child a question to their either target or their strength. So there's lots of different strategies then that we've put in place that then take that conversation to another level.
Dr. Orr, can you drill down just real quick, before this gets too long, a little bit about zone analysis as well?
So that's a different way of differentiating, and as the teachers are taking pre and post assessments for our local assessments that we've designed, when Mr. Kennedy was talking about all of the tests have the depth of knowledge on the test, as well as the standard, what question that's addressing. There's then the zone analysis that is labeled in that same manner, and when the teacher gives the pre-test, there's a formula within a Google form that the teachers are implementing, and they can see as to red, yellow, green, and blue, how well the students know that particular standard, and then also are able to derive their instruction and differentiate based on that data.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Flossmoor Hills, Ms. McRaven.
Hey, Ms. McRaven.
Take my podium away.
Where do you miss? Where do you want it? Right back where it was?
Right here was. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education. Flossmoor Hills is proud of our successes last school year, and we're striving to improve on them this school year. Tonight we chose to specifically focus on our math growth data because that reflects the individual growth of our students. As you can see from our slides, in the area of math, our grade levels perform between 50.8% to 84.7%. As Dr. Ward presented last month, our spring to spring RIT scores have increased with a range from 6 points to 20.3 points. We are really proud of our students in the area of math. In the area of reading, our students perform from 57% to 86.8%. They increased their spring to spring RIT scores with a range from 5.7 points to 18.6 points. This will get us closer to the RIT scores that we want for students who attend those state schools, such as the University of Illinois. During our training, the CEC specifically asked us to determine our scientifically based research strategies based on our GAN. Our GAN in the area of math is numbers and operations, and in reading it's vocabulary. In the area of math, we're going to use what's called number talks, and then in the area, and that's really going to focus on making sure that the students have mental math and computation skills. And then in the area of reading, we really want to focus on vocabulary. And in order to do that, we're going to use the Isabel Beck reading strategies, and those focus on tier 2 words, which are your words that are your high frequency words for mature language learners. We feel as though if we really focus on that, that's going to improve their scores across all areas of reading. For culture, we have a positive culture at Flossmoor Hills, but we really want to make sure that our parents and all stakeholders understand our PBIS and our ODR process. We always choose a theme for the school year, and our theme for this year is Life is Good at Flossmoor Hills, and we truly believe that. Any questions? Thank you.
Dr. Peters?
For those newer board members, this is almost completely how it goes every year. Whoever leads off is a 30-minute ticket with all kinds of questions, and everybody else kind of, and you get into a little rhythm and a pattern.
That's how I got you to go first. Right. We're gonna break it in.
Good evening, Board of Education. Thanks for having me tonight. At Heaven Hill, we have successes that we would love to present to you tonight. We are very, very pleased that the majority of our students in math, our scores were 69% of all grade levels met their growth goals. So in math, Heaven Hill increased the spring to spring rate scores by 69% for all grade levels with a range of 1 to 16 point growth points. Our math growth, kindergarten 81%, first grade 69, and you can see all the others, reaching the second 10% in the nation for those who in the 60s and 70s in the top 1%. In reading, Heaven Hill increased our spring to spring rate scores by 73% for all grade levels with a range of 2 to 20 points, and we're really, really proud of that. And you can see the scores for the NWA spring to spring from kindergarten through 5th grade there. Very proud of those scores. Our GAN in reading was literature. It's our greatest area of need. And our SMART goal would be by spring of 2015-16 school year, at least 73% of our students will meet their individual growth targets in reading. In math, our GAN was measurement and data. And our goal for that is by spring of 2015-16 school year, 70% of our students will meet their individual growth targets. Our action plan to attain these goals include reading. Teachers will implement the strategies from the NWA Math Learning Continuum to focus on our students' GAN, which is literature. This tool will be used to address the specific learning needs and targets of each student in the area of reading. In math, teachers will implement the strategies from the NWEA Learning Continuum to focus on the GAN, which is measurement and data. This is something different. Some teachers dabbled in it last year and they had great successes. So they were like our pilot teachers. And because of their successes, we want to implement that with all of our teachers, all of our students, because it targets the students' specific needs. And that will increase our goals. We'll achieve our goals and also increase where the students are performing at this point. Yes.
So what does that look like, the continuum, the learning continuum?
The learning continuum has specific skills and strategies to implement the students at the low areas. Right. Those students who are low performing, those students who are in the middle are challenged, and those students even at the top are challenged as well. Say for instance, students, our GAN might be learning literature. One student may be performing at a certain level, so they give strategies for those specific students.
That's what I mean, for example.
For example, a student might be, if they're learning literature, they might have lessons as far as reading a book at a certain lexile. That student will maybe read a passage, or that passage will be at a different lexile. The student who is higher performing will read different books at different lexiles for those students, and they'll have different questions. They have the students delve deeper into how they respond to the questions.
As far as college readiness, where are we at with the continuum? Are we making growth? We have, what, 2 years left, our goal? Where are we at with Heather?
We are making great gains as far as college and career.
There's been great gains made the last 2 years.
Pardon?
There's been excellent gains made the last 2 years.
Absolutely. And they're moving very close to, they're not where we need to be in all grade levels. We do have some areas of need as far as the grade level, but almost every single grade level has progressed and gotten closer to that college and career readiness. So we're closing up that gap. And the reason we have such goals is because our students were lower performing, and we made great gains to close that gap. And we're trying to do catch-up growth right now so that we can make sure that those attainable goals or those scores where students need to be to get closer to college and career readiness, they are there now. So those students at the top, we're trying to maintain and make sure that they stay there. They can increase more, then they increase more. Those students who are in the middle, we call our yellow kids, we can easily push them and they become green kids. And those students who are red, our lower performing students, are getting closer to where they need to be as well.
So the third graders that were at 41.6, they're now the ones who are in fourth grade?
Correct.
And and so those fourth graders need to have a specific continuum that brings their scores up to the 69% average that you have in other grades, and then still meet the growth this will grow.
Absolutely, and when those students work with the teachers in order to plan their strategies or their growth goals or their learning plan, the teachers sit down with them, and it's not necessarily just that guest teacher who is in there. We also have the reading instructional coach in there as well as the reading coaching with those students. When we get to the point where they sit down and they come up with this plan, they will have people who are experienced in doing this to help them go through that. And also at parent-teacher conferences, we will hope that the parents will be a part of that plan as well. Because at some grade levels last year as well, we had the students come out and they participated in the parent-teacher conference. And they went over that plan for them, just like we have our school improvement plan. The student has their own school improvement plan as well. They talk about what their scores are, where they should be, what their growth targets should be. Say, for instance, I should make 7 growth points. You talk with the students and say, do you think this is attainable for you based on the trend data? The last 3 years, this is how you scored. This year, you made 2 growth points. The next year, you made 5 growth points. This year, they say that you should make at least 7 growth points. Some students will go with that and say, yes, I'll go with the 7 points. And some students say, no, I think I want to be higher than that because I want my grade to be this. And not only do they project or have a goal for themselves or set a goal for themselves, they also talk with the teachers about what strategies will you use. What will you do in order to achieve your goals? And they might say, I might try to read books at this style. Although I'm here, I might stretch myself here, ask questions, have my parents ask questions, talk with my parents about it, buddy read in the classroom, have my teacher ask me questions, have my partner ask me questions, those types of strategies, specific things that they can do in order to increase their goals.
I think that was a great idea to have the child there with this time. Last time with the parent teacher, I know that when my little cousins came home,
Right.
they were having a team discussion, you know, okay, how are we going to do this? Versus me coming home going, look, your teacher said you need to do da-da-da-da-da. The child was there and was a part of that discussion on what was expected and what was
And
needed.
those are the students that I find just walking up and down the hallway, when they get their red scores back, when they take the test in January, they want to celebrate. They're proud of the accomplishments that they made because they were involved with that process. Mrs. Spears, I got this. This is what I got. This is but I did double digits instead of 7. I got double digits. They're extremely excited about that. So when you hear the students have that kind of passion about their learning, it really is huge.
And knowing what the goal is, what they're working for.
Absolutely.
Dr. Spears, on that, right there, those scores, they're very good.
Yes.
You look at that 3rd grade in math, you go down to the 3rd grade in reading, 78%, they're over the 1% in the national average.
Absolutely.
But that 3rd grade math, how is that being addressed now with that cohort of kids? We don't know, I would imagine most of those kids stayed going into 4th grade.
Correct.
What specific strategies in math are we doing to help the GAN and catch-up growth in math for them?
With the catch-up growth, we make sure that the students are working with the instructional coach and also the Tier 2 students who are Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. We have a parapro, a Title I paraprofessional working with those students in their area of need because they may be different for different students. So whatever those specific needs are, when those students are pulled out, they work with our math teacher to make sure that she gets them where they need to be. And also, the reading coach is also our MTSS coach as well. So she does more than just reading. She also works with the students. There is pull out. There's also push in. And for those students who are attaining what they need to be, we have our ACE teacher going in, and she goes in once per week to provide instruction for the entire class. And she also provides instruction for the teacher so she can follow through with those types of techniques once she is gone. There are also students that she pulls out with small groups as well to push those students where they need to be. So there are supports in place for those students who are below where they need to be and those students who need to be challenged.
So my question is, we do have a teacher out in that grade level.
Yes.
On a leave right now. And our other 4th grade teacher, is she assisting, collaborating, guiding, as well as I know the teacher who is out on her leave, she's also in contact with the teacher that's in there. Are those communication avenues solid? Are the lesson plans solid? What's going on with that specific situation?
The lesson plans are solid because the teacher who is out actually does those lesson plans and sends them to us. And she also talks with her partner at that grade level. And also the guest teacher who is there collaborates on a weekly basis, more often than that, but during the PLCs definitely, because those are the sessions that I sit in every 2 weeks. I sit in with those teachers as they plan. So I know that they're planning the same curriculum. I see the lesson plans that are coming through, so the lesson plans are the same. And if you look at the 4th grade from last year, her math growth was 70%. So she was in the top 1% as well, and then almost in the top 10% as far as her reading. So those meetings do take place, the collaboration does take place, and we want that to continue this year.
And where did you say I would find those numbers that I asked the question about?
The College and Career Readiness, when you received the map data that had each school's and the 3 years trend data at the bottom of that sheet are where those scores are.
So this was 2 meetings ago? Is that when we got that?
When did you provide that data, Dr.
Was that the
Dusser?
box of all that information?
Pardon?
Was that the box of all that information? What are you talking, the handout?
When we provided the map scores, I think it was that over the summer.
Okay.
Any more
There,
questions?
you said more questions? Okay, we all set? Thank you, Dr. Fears. I certainly appreciate your report on success.
My pleasure.
Serena?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'd like to talk about the successes at Serena. I would like to tell you about the valuable work that our team continues to do in best interest of all of our stakeholders, but certainly the impact it's had on our students. So in the area of math, Serena Hills increased our spring to spring RIT scores for all grade levels with a range of 10.8 to 21.6 points. Our math growth on the NWA for spring, kindergarten 78%, first grade 68%. You'll see a drop here in second grade, that 39%. I will let you know there was an action plan already put in place for this year. We did look at zone analysis. We did disaggregate our data and look at those kids that really were functioning below the target levels. And at Serena, we have a lot of students that are getting what we call Tier 2, Tier 3 interventions, which is supplemental support that helps them and is, again, supports what we do in the core curriculum. We had many students coming out of that second grade into third grade in interventions. So we really looked at how we were going to progress monitor the measurable impact of those interventions, and we're looking at those in short increments so that we can tell whether they're succeeding or growing.
What can you define what a lot?
I'd have to go back and look, but I would say there was probably a good 30% of those kids. We have a high level of English language learners, not to mean that they're all in interventions, but we do have a lot of our kids in intervention programs. Probably, I would say, what you say, Dr. Ward, more than any other district. More so than anyone else.
The other schools.
So we look at and watch the measurable impact of those interventions on our kids to make sure that they're progressing and moving forward. Our third grade did exceptional, 69%, fourth grade 72%, and fifth grade 84%. In the area of reading, we increased our spring to spring RITs for all grade levels with a range of 9.5 to 20.6 points. Our reading growth on NWA, kindergarten 68%, first grade 52%, second grade 59%, third grade 67%, fourth grade 69%, and fifth grade 75%.
Ms. Demetro, I just want to go back.
Sure.
What, that second grade, that number, what did you identify? What is the gap and how is it being addressed? I know you said you have an action plan. Do you have that on hand?
Yeah, you mean what area?
What area in math?
Yeah, algebraic thinking and measurement is across the board. Measurement and data is across really the board, across the board in our guy.
I am seeing a lot of measurement on the tweet out from the teachers.
Right, you could see
those
us,
things.
again, we're doing it.
Focus, but that was it, and, okay.
Operation algebraic thinking, but across the board, we were pretty much measurement and data. So, again, we're really honing in and looking at instruction in those areas. And then I'll have to say again, we're progress monitoring and looking at those deficit and those foundational skills across the board.
How does this affect them in other, do you find that it affects them in other areas when, I think that Dr. Fears said it as well, the pullout, when you're pulling the children out, they're missing other information, that's still going on in the classroom?
Well, we never pull them out of the core. So
Okay.
in reading and math, we never pull them out of the core. And then there's an intervention block that usually occurs right out of their core time.
Mhm.
So there's not any student who ever misses their core in reading and math. And interventions usually take place if it's small guided groups, smaller groups like 4 or 5, 3 to 4, usually happen in that intervention block. Unless there's students that are special ed and they have other additional minutes other places, multiple minutes. So our greatest area of need, our GAN, math, is to increase student performance in the area of operational and algebraic thinking and certainly measurement and data. We talked about reading across the board to increase vocabulary skills, which will increase our overall reading performance. And research shows those kids who have a really good skill bank of vocabulary are usually better readers. So we're working on that. And then our action plan is to progress monitor the measurable impact of our research-based interventions in the areas of reading and math, to implement the Words Their Way Phonemic Awareness Foundational Pilot Program, which we're doing at Serena this year. And that is specifically to increase vocabulary skills. So that's part of the action plan. To use data-driven instruction, DDI strategies, and increase understanding of, we talked about the depth of knowledge, our rigor to enhance guided and shared strategies. And for our culture is to build positive relationships with all stakeholders through school-wide activities, utilizing the classroom as a laboratory for learning. I really believe that our students need to go out, and we're doing that successfully with service learning and taking our learning and transitioning into the community where there's some real-world application and further the development of social emotional competencies of all students. Questions? Yes.
Just one. Can you go back to the slide with the numbers? There. So, and I want to make sure I'm getting this right. So even though the second grade was only at 39th percentile, they increased spring to spring for at least 10%? I mean, 10 points? Is that, I'm not sure I understood that.
I'm not sure, Matt.
Okay, I'm sorry. In the area of math, Serena Hill increased our spring to spring grid scores for all grade levels.
Well, there was growth in that area, not all, I mean, even though it was low, there was some growth in those point ranges. That's just from lowest to highest. So when you look at the 10.8 to 21.6, that's from lowest to highest. There could have been kids in that range that have grown, but there was obviously kids that had dropped.
All right, that's just a little bit misleading. I'm trying to figure out what
The way it was worded,
like
probably.
10%.
Does
Okay.
that make sense, man?
Does it make sense?
Clear as mud? No, it is. It's difficult, because when you look at 60%, your first thing, what is 60%? Well, that's the top 10% of the nation, according to math. So it's a different mindset.
Any sense of what happened or what's going on in
Yeah,
second
I do.
grade?
I could tell you a little bit. We did look at it a lot of different angles. So we made some staffing pattern changes. We looked at some different rigor. We looked at our common assessments and tweaked them a little bit. We went back and looked at specific kids who may needed more support. We looked at differentiated instruction. So we really teased out the kids and looked at them individually, kind of like with what Mr. Kennedy was talking about, that we really went back and did some goal setting in specific areas for kids. Absolutely. So it wasn't just one variable that I think had impact on it. I think there were multiple things, and I think we strategically and effectively made those changes.
Our goal setting, is that something, I think it's great that we're, bringing in kids on that. I think that's essential, and certainly that's supported in literature. Are parents also being part of that? And
Absolutely. I mean, on eChalk, every week there has to be changes made, and so they'll talk about that. But there's individual meetings that occur once a week with every child, one-to-one with those teachers. And they talk about in areas in reading and math, they have charts and color graphs, and they talk about this is where we were last week, this is where we are this week, this is the skill you're working on, and they have data charts in the classroom as well, and it's broken down to their level so that they understand it. And that's highly effective. So there's a visual, there's authentic dialogue that takes place, and then the parents. At Serena, we have parent activity day once a month, And we have an overwhelming number of parents that attend, and they look at those interactive walls that we have, and they're very much aware of where their children are and how they're progressing.
And would you say that parent involvement has increased that you've noticed?
Oh, at Serena, absolutely. I mean, yeah, on a whole, I mean, literally, you know, we have parents that come in and support the school. They're highly involved in a lot of ways. As you can see, we just had, you know, just our fundraiser, we raised $1,000 on a pancake breakfast, you know. And so we're really working hard to get more of our English language learner parents in, our Hispanic parents, and to be a part of the process. And I would say that we have been highly successful in opening our doors and being a community, which is one of our strategic goals, and I think that we're meeting that successfully. So plan your date in March, because we're having spaghetti dinner.
I was thinking about that. I missed it.
Yeah, it was. It was been advertised on the website, and we had it was on the St. Karen's marquee, and we had signs up all over the community, and we
Make
had
sure
business.
You get a personal invite.
Yeah, make sure you get a personal invite on that spaghetti, and good Italian bread. Thank you, board, for all of your continued support, and certainly Dr. Duster and your most prestigious cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Board of Education. Dr. Duster.
Hi, Dr. Prosen. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm family of four, being the youngest. I'm used to being the caboose. So it's my pleasure to share with you the successes at Western Avenue. In terms of our proficiency scores, we had a range increase from spring to spring from 9.4 to 22.9 in the area of math. We were trying to get double-digit growth in proficiency in just about every grade level. Fell a little short, but we're right there. As you can see, our math growth ranged from the 90s. Fourth grade, we had almost 60% there, and again, our goals are always to be in that 60% above. Reading, we saw, again, an increase from 6.4 to 20.3 in terms of the spring-to-spring increase in RIT. That's putting us very much in line with raising the level to the college and career readiness scores, where we want to benchmark off of. And then we also saw some growth ranging all the way in the 60s up to almost the high 70s in reading. In terms of greatest area needs, math, what we saw was really the application piece and going a little bit deeper with our rigor. So we wanted to make sure that this year we're addressing math vocabulary and math across the curriculum, that we're not just teaching skills in isolation, that we're not just teaching the algorithm or the specific process or skill, but how do they actually apply it. Because really when you get into some of our high achieving scores, when we're looking at growth in math, they're asking it for that application, they're asking for an evaluation, they're asking for multi-step processes. They're not just looking at the algorithm or the skill to be applied. They're asking for, as I said, that multi-step process and problems and strategies. In reading, we saw that our greatest area of need is analytical writing, and that's tied very closely to informational text and also raising the complexity of our text. That students are actually, as I said, formulating arguments, doing comparison contrast within text, and that they're bringing their own personal kind of body of knowledge to make arguments as well. And then our culture, our focus has continuously been on relationships, teachers to students, teachers to administration, administration to community. Here are some of the ways that we hope to go about achieving those goals. We're going to continue the strategies of DDI, but we're also looking at Webb's depth of knowledge in terms of what we're asking our students to actually accomplish in both the instructional pieces as well as the formative assessment pieces. We're looking at writing initiative here in the district, and we've already kind of started to have some discussions. I know Dr. Work had a couple of the teachers out to look at ways in which we can advance and really get some complex text in our writing. And we're also looking at ISBE Unit of Studies, which has really developed that area. In math, the ISC4 coaching, we've been very, very excited. I think that that's the way to go. The principals have had an opportunity to sit down with their coaching. We're looking forward to our first opportunity to work with them in October. But they really talk about not only the instructional mindset of getting kids to have that real world application, but giving them multiple opportunities to address situations in terms of math, and also the ability for that dialogue and to build up that math vocabulary. We're utilizing SMART training at our first team, or at first grade team level. This is the first time it's getting down to our primary grades, where they're really starting to use that data as the driving force of their instruction, and that we've, again, are looking at the ESB units in math. In culture and climate, we started to experiment with Sean Akers' research, and Sean came out of Harvard University. He's an educational psychologist, works with not only school districts, but works with a lot of companies about how you can implement some things in your own work and in your own mind shift to affect the collective culture and climate, and talks a lot about individuals' responsibilities within the culture and climate, not just at the collective level. We're also looking to explore video and web opportunities for engagement. We're looking at podcasting a little bit and experimenting with that with our parent population, getting some videos out, and of course we'll continue to survey our climate and culture at several points throughout the year.
There's no initial questions. I'm glad to hear that math vocabulary is going very well. I know last year one of your key features of your plan was academic vocabulary. Is this something that you're phasing in different disciplines over the years, or is this something where you've narrowed it down to specific math vocabulary? Can you give a context for this?
Again, that comes kind of out of looking at our data and what we're starting to see, especially as kids get into their math testing, and particularly the PARCC testing. We were seeing a lot of stump looks about vocabulary and some of the things, especially when you start getting into 5th grade and you start getting into specific geometric terms, or you start getting into some specific process terms. We saw some kids who were starting to be a little bit stumped by that. So that's what kind of drew us.
That is being addressed, and if you don't mind, just a follow-up question to Dr. Work. Is this something that we're expanding to?
All of our units of study actually already include academic vocabulary, and so that is something that's being addressed across all of our grades K through 8, because each unit of study in reading and in math all have those grade level specific vocabulary.
Dr. Ward, just real quick, just real quick, you and I have had a lot of discussions on writing. We know it's a concern in the community. We've talked about social studies, or C3, that's coming out, which hasn't been adopted by the State Board of Ed yet, which will be out next year, and next generation science matters. We've had those discussions. Also, we've had discussions about textbooks and things of that nature. Can you talk a little bit, real quick, just let the board know where we are at with this, because it'll be soon. We're going to be bringing something.
Sure. So twofold. First of all, do we need Dr. Frozen anymore?
I do have a question for Dr. Frozen. Dr. Frozen, after looking through all the data, after all these years, I started to see, after talking with you, an increase. Looking at the data, there was a plateau line there, and those kids, they were still high, but there was a plateau. Those kids are now rising. They're going from one area to, they're jumping that up. That continuation, what are you doing? What are your teachers doing? You're looking at the data, right? That's exceptional growth that's being made, but that's harder to increase the score of a child who's already had those experiences and knowledge. So can you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll be finished?
Sure. As we said, we did kind of start to see that dip at kind of the introduction to intermediate grades, and then we would see kind of a leveling off. And now we're actually starting to see our end products, our 5th graders, we're starting to see that increase in higher exit scores and higher exit growth than where we were. I really have to chalk that up. We've got some really solid teachers at those grade levels at 4th and 5th, and I think one of the things that they're really doing is they've had permission to kind of not feel like, all right, here's where our curriculum ends and that's where we're gonna stop with these kids. They've used, as I said, some great online tools and able to go in where, you know, especially with math is sometimes difficult because it's such a, as you get into those higher level math skills, they become more kind of content specific. So we're asking 5th grade teachers to expose kids to kind of geometry or even an Algebra 2 course. But now with the internet resources that are out there, you can not only have Odyssey, but you can also have you know, areas like rectangle math, and you can do some other programs that are out there that enable kids to have that exposure and have that individualized learning. And that's where I think our teachers have started to go with our students as best that they can. And I think that that's what's increasing that growth. So the exciting part, and also I think the scary part of this is that unknown of where we're pushing our kids into in terms of 5th grade, because we've got some very, very bright kids. We want to make sure that they continue to grow. What we can offer for them in specifics, as I said, it's a little fluid right now, but we're kind of managing our way through it.
Yeah, we're seeing that with our other elementaries as well. You don't know that I see everything globally, but we're seeing the same situation, the different types of delivery models that are being given by our teachers. The kids are growing, and we're trying to adapt to that as quickly as we can. So,
and I have to say the teachers have done a great job of adapting to that.
Before you, I was trying to kind of get this question in, and I think it's you and Dr. Ward, because you started saying that about writing. That did catch my eye. That was one of the things, obviously, that Dr. Moon brought up earlier about the writing, and then the fact that you actually have something in there. I'm really interested in what you're implementing and how did you kind of get to that point, and it might get to a
I was
larger.
going to say, because I can answer that.
Talk about
all of our
things,
units of study incorporate writing. Math incorporates writing, and ELA incorporates writing. And so what we've already done is built into the curriculum through the use of the close reads, more opportunities for writing and the writing across the curriculum. And that's something that we have purposefully done. This year, if you can think back, some of you weren't on the board at the time, but in January, we talked about moving forward with making the units of study for writing. So the teachers are now actually, so that formal writing curriculum that Dr. Amu was asking, she knows that we're in the process of writing that this year so that it is specifically addressed. It's already embedded in, because what we already know about best practice is you can't just do something on its own. It has to be paired with something else. And so what we know is reading and writing do have to be paired together to get to those best practices so that the kids can actually apply what they are learning. So we are in the process of writing those units of study. We have looked at resources to bring to the board for purchase that are supplemental resources that will support those units of study in the area of writing and in grammar. And so we are looking at those supplemental resources, and we'll bring a recommendation to the board, we think, in November for purchase of those. This summer, the teachers who were working on the units of study looked at that. We broadened that to all teachers 4 through 8, and because there's different resources 4 through 8, and there's a different resource K through 2 that we're looking at. Some of the qualities that we were looking is that they were park-like, because what Park has done is actually, instead of just writing a narrative on who I am, it's now tied to what was this like with these characters, and can you then do a narrative with these. And so those were some of the qualities that we were looking for in the resources. We just had a resource meeting at Park Junior High, I believe that was on Thursday afternoon, and had one of the representatives from the company come out to anyone in grades 4 through 8 who wanted to hear from the representative. And then we are getting ready to have another company, I want to say in 2 weeks, come, and we'll do that same thing again.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rosen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ward.
At this time, I will make I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session. Mrs. Harrell? Second. Mrs. Huckabee? Okay, all in favor? Well, actually, we have to make that roll call. We go into executive session for matters related to personnel, negotiations, and student issue.
Forgetting I'm out of order here, I just had a question. A parent had a final statement, they went away to education.
Yes.
I just didn't know how to.
Is it something they say now, or? You know what? If procedurally, our comments are specifically meant to be a very specific timeframe that audience made comments, and so as a general practice, we don't offer that at this point because we need to move on to other agenda items. However, if you would like to talk to the board afterwards, or in this particular case, if it can be extremely brief, that would be perfectly fine.
I will be extremely brief.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just want the record to show that you did suggest that we send emails. We have sent emails.
Okay.
Some were addressed and some weren't, and just not to our satisfaction. We just want to make sure that that goes on record, that we have exhausted that effort as well. Okay, we will continue to send that, but I really urge you to move forward on this and to hear our voices. We are passionate as parents, as everyone else is, about the education, the academics of our students. Okay, it's been weeks and weeks. We're going on 30 days now, and after that 10th day, I think they've lost so much. Okay, but we don't see as parents the so-called push-in or the efforts of all the other experts that are coming into the classroom. We don't see that. So whether or not it's doing our kids any good, we don't know that. Okay, we don't see it, and we really would like for you to act on this. It's escalated to this point, so we're not satisfied with where we've gotten thus far.
Okay, I understand, and thank you very much. And certainly it is the passion of our parents, for which I hope to count myself as a parent, that makes this district fantastic. You have been, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Graham, we have roll call.
Okay, Marks?
Yes.
Odom? Yes. Simmons?
Yes.
Huckabee? Yes. Forrest?
Yes.
Carroll?
Yes.
Fraser?
Yes, motion is passed. We will be going into executive session. Now, I'm guessing in about 45 minutes, half hour to 45 minutes. If you wish to stay, you're welcome to, otherwise.